In the midst of a ruined dungeon where destruction reigned there emerged a magician whose name was Shin Ha-yeol. He strode into the open among shattered stones and broken columns, and his appearance was marked by a quiet determination that belied the chaos surrounding him. The ruined walls and the splintered ceiling spoke of an ancient calamity that had reduced the once formidable stronghold into a mere skeleton of crumbled stone and debris. The silence that filled the cavernous space was interrupted only by the soft echo of his measured footsteps and the distant sound of dripping water from fissures in the cold stone. As Shin Ha-yeol advanced deeper into the heart of the ruined dungeon, he encountered a monstrous creature of enormous proportions that lurched from the shadows. Its massive form sent tremors across the broken floor, and the beast released a thunderous roar that reverberated along the corridors of decay. The sound of the roar was a proclamation of its fury, and a warning of the peril that lay ahead of the lone magician. Standing tall amidst the desolation, Shin Ha-yeol gathered his inner strength and raised his hand to summon the ancient power that resided within him. A bright beam of light shot upward into the sky as a herald of his incantations and as a sign that he had begun to cast a spell of great magnitude. The magician bent low and placed his hand upon the cracked ground, and in doing so he created a glowing magic circle beneath his feet. The circle was inscribed with symbols and runes that pulsed with the energy of forgotten ages and ancient wisdom. The careful formation of the circle was a deliberate act that required precision and focus. For a moment the ruined chamber was bathed in a soft radiance that emanated from the circle as Shin Ha-yeol continued to raise a single delicate snowflake into the air. Its crystalline form shimmered with the cold promise of winter and foretold the arrival of a permafrost spell that would soon be unleashed in a final flourish. He completed the spell, and from the gathering cold, an ice spirit appeared before him in a display of frosty brilliance. The sudden appearance of the ice spirit transformed the atmosphere of the dungeon. For in an instant, all the walls and broken columns became covered with a layer of glittering frost that spread like a living tapestry across the ruined structure. The temperature plummeted as the chill of the permafrost seeped into every crevice and corner. The monstrous creature, sensing the change in the air, recoiled in a desperate attempt to escape the encroaching cold. It leaped backward with a wild fury, but the ice spirit blew upon it with a force that combined with a stream of ice that flowed from the hand of Shin Ha-yeol. The combined power of the magical onslaught caused the beast to become encased in a thick sheath of ice that immobilized it completely. At the moment when the monster lay frozen and defeated, the magic circle that had given life to the spell began to fade away. Its radiant glow diminished slowly, and the temperature of the dungeon gradually returned to normal, as if nature itself was rebalancing in the wake of the magical intervention. Shin Ha-yeol then turned his gaze upon the immobilized foe with a look of calm confidence that spoke of both mastery and certainty in his own abilities. Many years ago, the House of Magicians had earned its renown as the most skilled family of magicians in all of Korea. Their reputation was built upon centuries of dedication and mastery of the arcane arts within this illustrious lineage. There was a young magician whose talent had been recognized even among geniuses. His name was known as Shin Ha-yeol, and he was the third son of the prestigious House of Magicians. His potential was lauded by many, and he was regarded as an outstanding prodigy, until one fateful moment when Shin Ha-yeol entered the office of his father. The atmosphere in that room was thick with expectation and silent judgment as Shin Ha-yeol made his presence known and declared that he possessed all the knowledge required to excel in the magical arts. MC, who had been raised in the traditions of his forefathers, responded with a calm assurance that was reflected in a confident smile. He made a solemn vow that he would achieve feats worthy of the esteemed name of his family, and that his accomplishments would bring honor to the House of Magicians. He declared that he would graduate at the top of his class from the renowned Obelisk Magic Academy, and that he would one day become the greatest archmage in the world with the strength to lead the House of Magic to new and unimagined heights. His father, standing by a large window that looked out upon a world full of both promise and challenge, observed his son with a deep sense of pride mixed with high expectations. He spoke in measured tones of the extraordinary talent that Shin Ha-yeol possessed, a talent that surpassed that of his brothers and one that could not be matched by any other in the land. With a look of hope and a gentle smile, his father expressed the belief that Shin Ha-yeol would one day reach the zenith of the interactive magic world and prove himself at the summit of the magical arts. In that same moment, another young magician known as Shin Ha-yeol reached out and touched a medallion that hung close to his heart with a calm and determined smile. Shin Ha-yeol vowed that he would fulfill his promise to become the greatest mage in the world. He pledged that he would handle every challenge with flawless precision, and that he would rise to a level that would allow him to surpass not only his brothers but even his own father, who was revered as the greatest mage in the country. The ambition that burned within Shin Ha-yeol was fierce and unyielding, and his determination was a beacon that would guide him through the trials of the magical world. 2 years passed, and the scene shifted to the grand halls of the Obelisk Magic Academy, a prestigious institution where the most promising young magicians honed their skills and prepared themselves for the challenges of the magical realm. On a day marked by anticipation, the teacher gathered the second group of students and announced that they would be undertaking a practical test. The air in the academy was filled with both excitement and nervous tension as each student prepared to demonstrate the extent of their magical prowess. Among the students, there was one named Baek Sa-hyuk, who had earned a reputation for his exceptional skill in modern magical techniques. The teacher addressed Baek Sa-hyuk with an air of confidence and advised him to work as hard as he always had, for there was nothing for him to worry about. His tone was light yet assured, and it was evident that Baek Sa-hyuk felt secure in his abilities. His performance was regarded as exemplary, and he carried himself with the ease of one who was certain that his mastery of magic placed him far above those who struggled with the fundamentals. As the practical test commenced, a hologram appeared in the arena in the form of 2 monstrous creatures that had been conjured to test the mettle of the students. The arena became a stage upon which the talents of the young magicians would be measured in both skill and speed. Baek Sa-hyuk quickly opened a system window that manifested before him, and without hesitation he summoned a blazing fireball. That struck the holographic monsters with devastating force. His display of magical prowess earned praise from the teacher, who noted that Baek Sa-hyuk had successfully eliminated the creatures within the strict time limit. The ease with which he had accomplished the task only served to reinforce the belief that modern magic had reached a pinnacle of efficiency and precision. Shin Ha-yeol, who observed Baek Sa-hyuk's performance with quiet introspection, could not help but reflect upon the evolution of magic in this new era. The advent of artificial intelligence had led to many modern magicians implanting chips within their bodies that greatly simplified the casting of even the most complex spells. This integration of technology had raised the standard of magical performance to new heights, yet it also left little room for those who adhered strictly to the ancient methods. Shin Ha-yeol found himself struggling with these modern enhancements, for he had not mastered the techniques that were now commonplace among his peers. When the time came for Shin Ha-yeol to take his turn in the arena, he stepped forward and was immediately confronted by the sudden appearance of monstrous holograms that were programmed as his adversaries. With his eyes closed, he concentrated deeply on the inner workings of magic. He knew that the key to his power lay in the careful concentration of mana in the heart, which served as the source of all magical energy. He began to form a magic circle on the cold stone floor, and recalled that the ritual required him to follow 8 sequential steps before he could fully unleash his spell. The sequence was intricate and required absolute focus in order to be executed without error. As Shin Ha-yeol endeavored to complete the ritual, the monstrous holograms attacked with relentless ferocity, forcing him into a state of urgent defensive action. The chaos of the moment left little time for error, and every heartbeat echoed the pressure of the impending threat in the midst of this struggle. Baek Sa-hyuk laughed at the sight of Shin Ha-yeol's difficulties, and his ridicule was a sharp reminder that many considered his traditional methods to be relics of a bygone era. The laughter of his rival was a bitter sound that resonated in the silent arena, and it seemed to affirm the belief of those who felt that magicians who did not embrace interactive magic had no place in the modern world. The holograms of the monsters soon disappeared as the time allotted for the test came to an end. The teacher announced that Shin Ha-yeol had failed to eliminate the threat within the prescribed time, and the other students joined in with mocking laughter. Shin Ha-yeol clenched his hand into a tight fist and sighed heavily as he recognized yet another setback in his journey. It was a moment of quiet despair, yet even in failure, he could see a small measure of progress, for he had managed to improve the speed of his transformation, even if only slightly, on that difficult day. Despite the bitter taste of defeat, Shin Ha-yeol refused to allow his spirit to be crushed. The memory of that confrontation in the ruined dungeon, where Shin Ha-yeol had vanquished a monstrous foe with the power of ancient magic, served as a beacon of hope and inspiration for him. His determination was not diminished by the scorn of his peers or by the harsh judgment of his instructors. Even when his own father, once filled with hope, sent him a pill designed to destroy the magic circle in his heart, as a symbol of renunciation, Shin Ha-yeol remained steadfast in his belief in his dream of greatness. In the solitude of his study, Shin Ha-yeol immersed himself in the ancient manuscripts and scrolls that detailed the time-honored rituals of the magical arts. He spent long hours poring over these texts and meticulously practiced the art of forming perfect magic circles and concentrating pure mana in the heart. The lessons of the past were not merely historical relics to him, but living guides that illuminated the path to true mastery. Every failure in the arena, every moment of ridicule, served as a lesson in perseverance and as a stepping stone toward refining his craft. Each day was a journey of discovery, and every night was filled with quiet determination as Shin Ha-yeol labored to integrate the old ways with the new realities of magic in a world dominated by technology. His mind was a repository of ancient wisdom and modern insight, and he was determined to create a synthesis of the two that would allow him to surpass the limits of his contemporaries. His progress was measured in small victories and incremental improvements, and though the challenges were many, he remained undeterred in his quest to honor the legacy of the House of Magicians. The halls of the Obelisk Magic Academy echoed with the ambitions of young magicians who reveled in the convenience of interactive magic. Yet Shin Ha-yeol continued on a solitary path marked by discipline and tradition. He recognized that the ease with which modern spells could be cast was accompanied by a loss of depth and authenticity in magical expression. His training was a rigorous and deliberate process, and every moment spent in solitude was an investment in a future where his unique approach to magic would shine forth and reclaim the ancient honor of his family. In the quiet corridors of the academy, where the soft rustle of pages mingled with the gentle footsteps of dedicated students, Shin Ha-yeol found solace in the study of the old texts and in the careful practice of long-forgotten spells. His heart was filled with the hope that one day he would prove that the ancient methods were not outdated, but held within them a power that was timeless and profound. The symbols and runes that he inscribed in his magic circles were not mere marks on stone, but living embodiments of a heritage that spanned centuries and carried with it the weight of ancestral wisdom. The memory of the battle in the ruined dungeon, when Shin Ha-yeol had unleashed a permafrost spell that brought forth an ice spirit and encased a monstrous foe in unyielding ice, remained vivid in the mind of Shin Ha-yeol. He recalled every detail of that encounter with clarity and used it as a constant reminder that true magic was born of both precision and passion. The sight of the frozen monster served as an enduring symbol of the strength that lay in the mastery of ancient spells, and it inspired him to work tirelessly in pursuit of excellence. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Shin Ha-yeol continued to refine his technique with unwavering focus. He practiced the intricate sequence of steps required to form a complete magic circle with diligence and determination. Every small improvement in the control of his mana was celebrated in silence, and every failure was analyzed carefully so that he might learn from his mistakes. His journey was one of relentless self-improvement, and every obstacle that stood in his way was met with a quiet resolve to overcome it. The world of magic was vast and full of both wonder and challenge, and Shin Ha-yeol knew that his path to greatness would be a long and arduous one. Yet he carried the legacy of the House of Magicians with pride and with the firm belief that the ancient ways held secrets that could one day elevate him above all others. In the face of the rapid technological changes that had swept through the magical community, he remained a steadfast advocate for the time-honored traditions that had defined the art for generations. In the silent hours before dawn, when the academy lay in a hushed stillness, Shin Ha-yeol would often retreat to a quiet corner and reflect upon the lessons of the past and the promise of the future. He would trace his fingers over the worn symbols inscribed on ancient tablets and let his thoughts wander to the legends of the great mages who had come before him. Each symbol held a tale of triumph and of trial, and instilled in him a deep sense of purpose and a determination to honor that legacy through his own work. The challenges that Shin Ha-yeol faced were many, and the journey toward mastery was fraught with obstacles that tested both his skill and his spirit. Yet in every setback there was a lesson, and in every moment of ridicule there lay the seed of future success. He understood that the true measure of a magician was not in the ease with which spells were cast, but in the perseverance to continue striving for excellence even when the odds were stacked against him. His resolve grew stronger with each passing day, and his belief in the enduring power of ancient magic became the foundation upon which he built his future. The narrative of Shin Ha-yeol's life was one of persistence and unwavering dedication, a journey marked by hardship and the constant struggle to bridge the gap between tradition and innovation. His experiences in the ruined dungeon and in the arena of the Obelisk Magic Academy were chapters in a larger story that was still unfolding, and each trial he faced added depth and meaning to his pursuit of greatness. In the face of modern advancements and the pressures of familial expectations, he remained true to his vision of a magic that was both authentic and transcendent. MC carried the weight of his aspirations with a quiet dignity and an unyielding commitment to the art that had been entrusted to him. He knew that the path to becoming the greatest mage in the world was lined with both triumph and sacrifice, and that every challenge he encountered would ultimately serve to refine his craft and strengthen his resolve. The legacy of the House of Magicians was not simply a memory of the past, but a living force that propelled him forward and filled him with the determination to reclaim the ancient honor of his forefathers. In the end, the journey of Shin Ha-yeol was one of self-discovery and relentless pursuit of excellence, a quest that demanded both the wisdom of the old ways and the courage to face the uncertainties of a rapidly changing world. His every action was a step toward the fulfillment of a dream that was larger than any one individual, and his story was destined to become a part of the eternal tapestry of magic that had been woven by generations of great magicians before him. The struggle was immense and the path was steep, but the fire of determination burned brightly in his heart as he continued his quest to one day stand as the greatest mage in the world and to lead the House of Magicians into a future where the ancient arts would be revered and celebrated for all time. He chose the traditional method of using an ancient spell that had not been employed for a long time to continue his studies in magic, and he knew that the great disadvantage of this method was that it confined his learning solely to ancient books and scrolls for reference. The room in which he resided was filled with a vast mountain of old books that lay scattered across the floor, and he could not help but wonder why it was impossible to convert all these fragile volumes into an electronic version for the sake of preserving knowledge, in a format that did not consume the endless space of his study. He pondered deeply about the limitations imposed by the traditional approach and the necessity of preserving every scrap of ancient wisdom in a more accessible and enduring form. Returning to the room after his daily lessons, he surveyed the chaotic piles of books that had accumulated over time, and his eyes suddenly fell upon a particular volume that seemed to stand out among the rest. Its cover was worn, and the edges of its pages were frayed by the passage of time, yet there was an unmistakable air of value about it, as if it carried secrets that had been preserved through countless generations. He picked up the book with a sense of anticipation and examined it carefully, noting that despite its age, it retained a dignified appearance that spoke of a storied past. He then opened the book slowly and began to leaf through the delicate pages, only to find that the complex and archaic handwriting made it nearly impossible to immediately grasp the contents. He studied the intricate script with care, and as he looked closer, he noticed the name Reborn interwoven among the lines of text. A slow smile spread across his face as he recalled that Reborn was known as the first great magician of mankind and the first emperor of the magical empire Wiener. He remembered well that Reborn was revered as the founder of magic and the very principles that governed the art, and in his youth he had often come across this illustrious name in the memoirs of ancient mages. His heart swelled with admiration and respect for the legendary figure whose influence had shaped the magical traditions of the land. In that quiet moment, as he turned the fragile pages, an unexpected occurrence unfolded. The pages began to shift and slide upward by themselves, and a radiant golden light emerged from within the book. This brilliant light grew more intense until it filled the entire room, and its glow became so powerful that it temporarily blinded him. The dazzling luminescence forced him to drop the book onto the cold floor, and he instinctively covered his face with his hands in a mixture of shock and wonder. The sudden burst of light left him momentarily disoriented and filled him with a sense of awe as he struggled to comprehend the mysterious phenomenon that had just taken place. After a few heartbeats of stunned silence, he removed his hands and gazed once more upon the open book. Now the glow had subsided to a gentler brightness that allowed him to see the faded yet elegant script more clearly. At that moment, a voice emerged from the very pages of the book, in a tone that was both gentle and commanding. The voice explained that only one who possessed an identic IC nature would be able to perceive its words and receive its message. The revelation struck him as both bewildering and significant, for it implied that the enchanted book was intended exclusively for someone with a unique magical disposition, and that its secrets were reserved only for those whose nature resonated with its ancient power. The experience of hearing the book speak left him profoundly surprised and filled him with wonder. He recalled earlier moments when others had dismissed his adherence to traditional methods, and he now understood that what many had deemed a weakness was in fact a hidden advantage that set him apart from those who relied solely on modern magical technologies. That very day, in the midst of the academic routine at the academy, the teacher had announced that those students who failed the practical test would be required to attend additional classes. Amid murmurs from the other students, it became evident that failure was attributed to the one who could not keep pace with the artificial intelligence techniques embraced by the majority, and he felt the weight of their scorn for his more ancient approach. Yet in that moment of despair, a transformation began to take place within him as the enchanted book seemed to light up his entire room with a bright and welcoming glow. The luminous display was as if the ancient magic itself had chosen to embrace him, marking the beginning of a rebirth in his magical journey. The next day, as he returned to class, he carried with him a newfound confidence that was bolstered by the events of the previous night. Later that day, during the lunch break, he made his way to the crowded cafeteria and sought refuge in a quiet corner by a window. He selected the farthest seat from the bustling activity, intent on reflecting on the mystery of the book and the voice that had spoken to him. Amid the low hum of conversation and the clatter of utensils, he sat quietly with his thoughts swirling around the remarkable experience he had just undergone. It was at this moment that his friend Ji-sun Chan approached carrying a tray laden with food. His arrival broke the silence, and though no words of greeting were exchanged, the presence of his friend was enough to momentarily lift the heaviness of his thoughts. Ji-sun Chan, known for his own experience as a sorcerer, had earned a reputation at the academy despite his somewhat unkempt appearance and his achievements, such as reaching the third circle of magical mastery at the age of 18, had secured him a place among the top students in their prestigious institution. Without engaging in much conversation, his friend settled opposite him and began to eat with a sense of contentment that contrasted with the gravity of his own recent experience as he observed his friend. He noted the simplicity of the gesture and the unspoken bond between them that had been forged through years of shared trials. In the challenging environment of the academy, it was a quiet moment of camaraderie amidst the rigors of their daily life, and it offered a brief respite from the intense focus required by their studies. After some time had passed, he shifted the topic of his internal reflection toward the strange book he had discovered the previous day. He recalled how, upon opening the book, he had noticed that every page after the third one was inexplicably blank, a feature that made the book appear even more enigmatic. It seemed to him that this was not a mere coincidence, but rather a deliberate design by the ancient author, Reborn, who had once been the greatest magician of mankind and the founder of the magical empire Wiener. He wondered if the peculiar nature of the book was a kind of test or perhaps a hidden inheritance meant only for someone with a unique magical trait. He described to his friend the extraordinary moment when the book, upon being opened, had emitted a cascade of golden light accompanied by a soft, kind voice that seemed to speak directly to his soul. The voice had delivered a message that the book was an inheritance, reserved for someone whose magical essence was distinct and powerful, and that those lacking such a nature would not even be able to unlock its secrets. His friend listened intently as he recounted the experience, and although the words spoken by the book were not fully clear to him, the implication was profound and left both of them in a state of deep contemplation. As he continued to explain the experience, his tone grew serious when he recounted the final lines that had left him both surprised and worried. The text on the last page of the book hinted at the creation of a magic circle. Not within his heart, but rather in his brain, this strange prophecy unsettled him, for it suggested that the transformation brought by the ancient magic might not be as benign as he had hoped, and that the very act of unlocking the book's secrets could carry unforeseen consequences. His friend, Ji-sun Chan, sensed the gravity of the matter, and his expression darkened as he realized that the message might be a warning rather than a blessing. The atmosphere between the two friends grew tense as the discussion turned from mere curiosity to the possibility of a dangerous fate. He felt a mixture of fear and determination as he considered the implications of the prophecy and the risk that a magic circle in the brain might pose to his very existence. Despite these trepidations, the experience with the enchanted book had ignited within him a fervent desire to explore the depths of ancient magic and to prove that the traditional methods still held a power that could surpass even the most advanced modern techniques. After the classes had ended that day, the two friends made their way to the dormitory where he invited Ji-sun Chan into his personal room. The space was modest, yet it was filled with remnants of ancient wisdom. From aged scrolls to small relics that had been carefully preserved over time, it was in this quiet sanctuary, away from the noisy corridors of the academy, that he decided to conduct an experiment to test the enchanted nature of the mysterious book. With deliberate care, he placed the worn book on a wooden table and explained to his friend that he wished to see whether the magical properties of the book would manifest for someone other than himself. He believed that if the book failed to reveal its secrets when held by someone without his unique identic IC nature, it would serve as undeniable evidence that the inheritance and the power contained within were reserved solely for him. The tension in the room was palpable, as his friend, with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity, reached out to take the book in his own hands. In that silent, expectant moment, the two friends awaited a reaction from the ancient tome. The friend took the heavy, time-worn tome into his hands and applied all the strength he possessed, yet no matter how much force he exerted, the book remained firmly shut. Realizing that the book would not yield under any amount of pressure, the friend relinquished his hold and returned it to Shin Ha-yeol with a heavy sigh, remarking in silence that the book did not budge at all. He entertained the notion that perhaps a powerful seal had been placed upon the volume, for its stubborn resistance suggested that some form of magical binding might be at work. Scratching his head in a state of bewilderment, he dismissed the matter as nonsense and informed his friend that he must leave without further delay, bidding him good night as he departed the room. Left alone, Shin Ha-yeol slowly opened the mysterious book to a page that was filled with intricate drawings. His brow furrowed as he considered the possibility that he might be able to unlock the secrets of the tome safely. At first, he observed that the page appeared entirely blank, a feature that both perplexed and intrigued him. Then, as his eyes adjusted to the subtle details of the faded paper, letters began to glow faintly against the pristine white surface. The unexpected illumination caused Shin Ha-yeol to pause and study the markings more carefully. In that moment, Reborn seemed to address his successor by turning the silent message into a question of understanding, implying that the method of using magic by creating magic circles in the heart was the natural way for an ordinary person to practice the art. Shin Ha-yeol noted the suggestion that this conventional method might not be the correct approach for one of his stature, and he was troubled by the possibility that the traditional technique was being challenged by the glowing inscription. Suddenly, the book levitated into the air and radiated an intense, otherworldly glow that filled the room with an almost unbearable brilliance. A voice, both gentle and commanding, emanated from the pages as if the ancient spirit of the text had awakened from a long slumber. The voice declared that if Shin Ha-yeol was to accept the will of the tome and become its disciple, he must first destroy the magic circle that resided in his heart and then forge a new circle within his head. Only after completing this perilous transformation should he attempt to open the book once more. The book then fell abruptly to the floor, and Shin Ha-yeol stared at it with deep concern and apprehension. In his troubled thoughts, he dismissed the entire occurrence as too extreme for any mere jest. Despite his inner turmoil, the message persisted, insisting that he was to create a new circle in his brain. He recalled that the very essence of mana, which served as the source of all magic, was known to be harmful to the brain if it were allowed to penetrate its delicate structures. Such an intrusion, he reasoned, could lead to a severe mental breakdown or even irreversible death in the worst of circumstances. Overwhelmed by the implications of the voice and the glowing book, Shin Ha-yeol became visibly nervous and clenched his hand into a tight fist. His mind raced as he contemplated the notion that the tome was effectively demanding that he commit an act akin to self-destruction. It appeared to him that the transformation required was so radical that it resembled a command to sacrifice his current self in order to birth a new existence as a mage. Unable to reconcile this request with his own sense of self-preservation, he resolved to set the book aside for the time being. Seeking refuge from the torrent of thoughts that now plagued him, he laid down on his bed and pondered the grim possibility of who in their right mind would willingly subject themselves to such a drastic metamorphosis. The following day, still burdened by the weight of the previous night's events, Shin Ha-yeol ventured to the teacher's office with the enigmatic book clutched in his hands. The teacher, curious about the source of Shin Ha-yeol's distress, inquired about the matter and accepted the book for closer examination. Running his fingers along the top of the ancient manuscript, the teacher commented that the book emitted a palpable aura of antiquity, and he questioned whether it was indeed an ancient manuscript of considerable renown. Shin Ha-yeol, who had been present during the earlier events, urged the teacher to inspect the volume further and determine if it was sealed by magic or possessed some other unusual quality. In response to the teacher's inquiry regarding why such suspicions were aroused, Shin Ha-yeol explained that peculiar rumors had been circulating among the students recently. Rumors that spoke of mysterious and enchanted texts that defied conventional methods. The teacher, however, cautioned that dwelling on fanciful tales was detrimental to one's academic performance and advised Shin Ha-yeol to direct his focus toward his studies. Placing his palm on the cover of the book, the teacher paused for several moments before handing it back to MC, stating that there was no detectable trace of magic present. He admonished Shin Ha-yeol to abandon his preoccupation with fairy tales and instead concentrate on the rigors of his academic pursuits. Grateful yet disheartened by the teacher's assessment, Shin Ha-yeol thanked him and left the office with a heavy heart. Despite his hopes for a glimpse of genuine magical wonder, neither his friend Sun Shan nor even the venerable teacher had managed to unlock the secrets of the book. In a rare moment of wry amusement, Shin Ha-yeol smiled to himself, reasoning that if the book could not be opened by anyone else, then perhaps there remained a sliver of truth behind the legends, and that the mysterious inheritance was indeed real. That evening, he returned to his room and carefully placed the enigmatic book in front of his feet, allowing his thoughts to drift toward the gravity of its message. He retrieved from his bag a small packet of pills that his father had sent him, pills that were intended to sever the mana circle in his heart. In his mind, the ingestion of even a single pill would mark a farewell to the cherished power that had defined his previous life as a mage. MC recalled the stern words of his father, who had insisted that he abandon the practice of hands-on magic in favor of a more theoretical approach. Yet Shin Ha-yeol felt no inclination to relinquish his connection to the ancient art. With trembling hands, he observed the two small pills resting on his palm, each one representing the potential end of an era. He gripped his wrist firmly, attempting to quell the tremors of fear that coursed through him. In that fragile moment, he found himself teetering on the margins of life itself, caught between the familiar world of his past and the uncertain promise of a radical transformation. Summoning every ounce of courage, he swallowed the pills, resigning himself to the possibility that if death were to come, then so be it. Almost immediately after the pills descended into his stomach, a surge of excruciating pain coursed through his body. The agony was so intense that it forced him to topple from his chair, his vision blurring as the searing torment took hold. The mana circle, which had been so firmly anchored at his heart, began to crumble under the relentless assault of the pain. In that harrowing moment, Shin Ha-yeol recognized that this anguish signified the end of his former self as a mage. The transformation he was undergoing was not one that could be halted. It was a crossing of a forbidden threshold in which the old Shin Ha-yeol would perish so that a new mage might be born. As the mana seeped into the intricate recesses of his brain, the initial familiar pain gradually diminished, only to be replaced by a new agony that was far more unbearable. This new pain was so overwhelming that it felt as though death itself was imminent. In the midst of his suffering, Shin Ha-yeol began to lose consciousness, his body shaking uncontrollably as the unbearable torment coursed through every fiber of his being. Amid the haze of pain and fading awareness, he found his thoughts consumed by a single desperate question. Was this truly the end? Was this death? Every moment seemed to stretch into an eternity as he struggled against the encroaching darkness, his mind reeling from the shock of the transformation that was taking hold. The excruciating sensation of mana flowing into his brain was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and the intensity of the new pain obscured his ability to think clearly, leaving him on the precipice of oblivion. In the final moments of his conscious struggle, Shin Ha-yeol was overcome by the realization that he had ventured into a realm of magic that few had dared to explore. The process of replacing the heart's magic circle with one in the brain was a transgression that defied the natural order, an act that risked not only his sanity but his very life. The agony that now pulsed through his mind was the harbinger of a metamorphosis that would forever alter his existence as a mage, and the thought of irreversible death loomed over him like a specter. Yet, in that state of near collapse, he also sensed that this extreme trial was a necessary crucible, one that would ultimately forge a new identity from the remnants of his past self. Thus, as Shin Ha-yeol lay trembling in the grip of excruciating pain and fading consciousness, he confronted the stark reality that his journey had reached a perilous crossroads. The old methods and traditions that had defined his early life as a magician were now giving way to an uncharted path, one that demanded a sacrifice so profound that it threatened to extinguish his very essence. In the silence that followed, as his mind teetered on the brink of oblivion, Shin Ha-yeol experienced a moment of clarity amid the torment. A realization that the suffering he was enduring was not merely an end, but also the beginning of a new chapter in his life as a mage. His body shook, and the darkness crept closer. Yet within the depths of his fading consciousness, there remained a spark of determination that defied the overwhelming pain. In that final, agonizing instant before succumbing completely to the transformation, Shin Ha-yeol's thoughts were consumed by the paradoxical nature of his predicament. The act of allowing mana to flood his brain, of destroying the ancient circle that had long been the source of his power, was an act of both profound loss and potential rebirth. As the new pain supplanted the old, he understood that the torment he now faced was the necessary price for transcending the limitations of traditional magic. The process was irreversible, and as the darkness claimed him, he was left to wonder whether this state of suspended consciousness was indeed a form of death, or merely the threshold to a new existence as a mage. At that moment, someone whispered softly in his ear, and Riel turned toward his successor as he listened to the gentle sound that was born from the essence of mana, and in that instant he found himself transported to another realm where the spirits of mana swirled around him in a graceful dance and began to whisper secrets of oneness. With the eternal mana he perceived distant voices, and soft laughter mingled with melodious singing, and it felt to him as if he had been blessed by the ancient power of magic. When the chaotic murmurs finally subsided, he regained consciousness and slowly opened his eyes to discover that the darkness of night had yielded to the gentle light of morning. Rising unsteadily from the cold floor, he examined his trembling hands as he wondered silently if he was truly alive, and his confused gaze soon shifted to the mysterious book that lay beside him. He picked it up with cautious reverence and was astonished to find that symbols had now appeared on what had once been blank pages. The clear and resonant voice of Ribel rang out in his mind, congratulating him on taking his very first step and declaring that the name of this sacred book was Ad-R, and that from that moment forward, the writing of his own legend would commence through the power of this ancient tome. The voice continued by promising that all the magic of old would be bestowed upon him as he was Shin Ha-Yol as a successor from the future, before pausing as if reconsidering his choice of address, and then softly calling him Shin Ha-Yol. His heart was stirred by these words, and tears of joy welled in his eyes as he embraced the promise of a destiny intertwined with the legacy of magic. A few days later, he found himself sitting in class as usual, while the gentle murmur of the teacher Lang Smith faded into the background, for his attention was entirely consumed by the mysterious book that had transformed his life. He flipped through its pages with a sense of wonder, and a growing smile played upon his lips as he discovered that each new page seemed to hold a fresh revelation. Who could have ever imagined that the pursuit of learning magic could be so exhilarating and filled with hidden knowledge that lay buried in the ancient words of the past? He recalled with a quiet certainty that every dread and every secret contained within those pages was a gateway to wisdom. In the process of reading, he also learned that mana possessed its own unique will, and that for most ordinary practitioners, allowing mana to flow freely into the brain would result in a violent clash between two opposing consciousnesses, ultimately causing devastating brain damage. It was for this very reason that mana was deemed destructive by those who did not understand its nature. Yet he recognized that there existed a special difference in his own case, for his focused thinking acted as a barrier that blocked the unbridled will of mana, so that he did not suffer its harmful effects. He gently touched the back of his head and reflected that this natural resistance was perhaps the reason why he had grown immune to the interactive magic that was commonly embedded in the brain via artificial chips. His reverie was abruptly interrupted by the firm voice of Lang Smith, who addressed all the students with a reminder regarding the midterm test that was scheduled for the second years. This time the teacher announced a new rule with a tone of authority and informed the class that from that day forward every student who failed the test would be expelled. The teacher's eyes narrowed slightly as he continued his explanation, and added with a wry smile that this new regulation had been proposed by the venerable House of Magicians. The mere mention of this rule elicited a grin from Shin Ha-Yol, who secretly relished the thought that at last the student deemed defective might be cast out permanently. The teacher then turned his gaze towards Shin Ha-Yol and remarked, with a gentle smile, that it appeared one of them was already teetering on the edge of failure. Despite the teacher's subtle mockery, Shin Ha-Yol paid little heed to such taunts, and instead allowed his thoughts to drift toward memories of his father and the lessons of old. That evening he journeyed into the city with a heavy heart and a determined mind. When he arrived at the training center, he was struck by the steep prices that were charged for renting a simulation training ground, as his phone revealed a fee of 200,000 per hour, a sum that was exceedingly difficult for him to afford. Nevertheless, he entered the facility, where the receptionist greeted him warmly, and Shin Ha-Yol calmly declared his intention to purchase a single hour of training. The receptionist inquired if he would train alone, and upon receiving his confirmation, the man placed a small card on the table and directed him to proceed to room number 14. It was in that room that he was expected to receive instruction on controlling the holograms, but Shin Ha-Yol firmly refused the offer, insisting that he already possessed all the knowledge he needed. Taking the card in hand, he strode purposefully into the designated room, while the attendant watched him with a mixture of disbelief and quiet amusement, thinking to himself that this must be Shin Ha from the prestigious House of Magicians, a young man from a famous family who appeared inexplicably incompatible with the modern methods of interactive magic, and that fate had dealt him a cruel hand. Inside the training room, Shin Ha-Yol initiated a simulation that required him to crush a pack of wolves, as his body stretched and prepared for the impending battle. A pack of wolves, low-ranking monsters that nevertheless posed a formidable challenge in numbers, appeared suddenly around him. Their eyes glimmered with the promise of attack, and their bodies moved with a predatory grace, ready to pounce at any given moment. Shin Ha-Yol extended his hand in a gesture that acknowledged the difficulty of facing 10 such Creatures at once noting that the average elimination time for such a test at the academy was recorded as 12 minutes 32 seconds. Yet Shin Ha-yeol saw this as an ideal opportunity to test the secret instructions that had been inscribed in the Eider for him. There was no better method to evaluate his prowess in practice than by engaging with the raw and untamed forces of nature. With a deep sense of concentration, he activated his new mana circle known as the Circle of Infinity, and in that moment a brilliant stream of magic erupted before him. The raw power manifested as an effulgent display that both startled and inspired the approaching wolves. Their instinctive response was to rush forward in an attempt to attack, and as soon as Shin Ha-yeol moved his hand with deliberate precision, a powerful stream of water surged forth, splashing against the monsters with overwhelming force. Observing the result of his actions, a smile broke across his face, as he marveled at the sheer power that now coursed through him. It was an incredible sensation, and for a moment he wondered silently if he had always possessed such extraordinary strength, even though he knew in his heart that such power could not be attained by those who relied solely on interactive magic with the conventional circles etched upon their hearts. At that pivotal moment, someone leaned in and whispered directly into his ear, and Riel turned to his successor, and in a calm yet probing manner, inquired if he could indeed hear the mysterious voice that now resonated in his mind. The voice, it seemed, was intricately woven with the essence of mana, and carried with it the authority of ancient power. In the blink of an eye, he found himself transported once again to a surreal space where the spirits of mana whirled around him in a breathtaking display. Their presence was almost tangible as they whispered in unison, and their voices intermingled with laughter and song. It felt as if he had been touched by a divine blessing that elevated his very soul. When the enchanting chorus finally subsided, he slowly regained full awareness and opened his eyes to behold the soft light of morning that had replaced the darkness of night rising from the floor. With a mixture of awe and trepidation, he examined his hands as if to confirm that he was indeed alive and capable of feeling. The mysterious book that had accompanied him throughout this surreal journey once again caught his attention, and he picked it up only to discover that on the once blank pages, new intricate symbols now glowed with an inner light. In that profound moment, the clear and majestic voice of Ribel rang out in his mind, congratulating him on the progress he had made, and declaring that henceforth the book would be known as Ad-R, and that it would chronicle the unfolding legend of his life. It was promised that through the venerable pages of this ancient tome, all the magic of old would be entrusted to him, and that he was destined to be recognized as a true successor for the future. In a tender, heartwarming moment, the voice softly corrected itself by addressing him as Shin Ha-yeol, and upon hearing that name, his heart swelled with joy and tears of gratitude streamed down his face. Thus, in the days and nights that followed, as he continued to balance the rigors of academic study with the profound mysteries of the enchanted book, his life became a tapestry of magic, destiny, and unwavering determination. Every moment was imbued with the promise of ancient wisdom and the thrilling possibility of uncovering secrets long forgotten by the modern world for him. Learning magic had transformed from a mere academic pursuit into an exhilarating journey filled with danger, wonder, and the potential for true greatness, a journey that he embraced with every fiber of his being and with a heart that beat in perfect rhythm with the eternal flow of mana. He activated the magic circle in his brain and caused the mana to circulate throughout his body thanks to the infinity circle, and the dormant power within him was released as he spread his arms wide and created a magic circle in front of him from which brilliant flames gushed out, and his mouth opened wide in surprise because he had not expected such a display of power. And Riel reminded him that he should not be surprised by these manifestations, for he had a long and arduous path ahead of him, and the infinity circle was the foundation of the Wait inner style of magic that enabled him to cast spells exactly as he envisioned them in his mind, and the image of his teacher, who had patted him on the head and waved his hand, came vividly to mind, as the teacher had said that this was only the first circle of the Wait inner style of magic, known as the Call of the Heart, and he felt a deep sense of satisfaction that he could already perform such impressive feats of magic at the very first circle, and so he continued his training with renewed determination. When he finished his rigorous training session, he left the training center and received a word of thanks from the attendant, who then went on to the 14th room to clean up while he himself walked up to the terminal to check how the failed geniuses were training, and he was very surprised to see that his own name was listed at the very top among many others. And upon learning that he had passed the rule test in 6 minutes and 37 seconds, he could not help but think that this performance might even be a record at the international level, and in a fit of anger he kicked the terminal in rage and exclaimed in his mind that this incompetent fellow had set such an astonishing record, and that the stupid piece of iron was acting up terribly. At that time, while Shin Ha-yeol continued walking down the street with a smile on his face and a light tune on his lips, thinking that the legend of his own power had just begun. Later, as he wove the first circle of his mana, he realized that the test of forming the first circle was a very serious trial for him, because what was described in the ancient book was far different from the basic techniques he had studied before, and the mana within his arms, legs, heart, and brain could now be subjugated to his will, though he did not fully understand the words written on one of the pages of the book, because the description was so vague that it seemed as if some deeper thought was eluding his understanding, and he longed to grasp it completely, but the elusive knowledge dissipated into the vast teachings of magic, as it was said, that there existed a certain wall of enlightenment that everyone encountered when faced with their ultimate limits, and that it was like crashing into an invisible wall, a fact that was relevant for all who practiced the arcane arts. He sat in the lotus position on his bed and closed his eyes while he contemplated that for the present he should focus solely on pumping mana through his entire body, just as the book had instructed, for it required him to be extremely concentrated, and he wondered if that was really all he needed to do, for when he later realized that he had been pumping mana continuously for 10 hours without a break, he understood that, in theory, he should have felt utterly exhausted. Yet the strange phenomenon was that he did not feel tired at all. That very day, as he went to class as usual, he was met by his friend Sunshine, who noticed that he looked sleepy and in a burst of concern slapped him on the back with all his might and asked if he was all right. And Shin Ha-yeol cried out in surprise and remained silent, while his thoughts churned that from that day onward he must ensure the constant circulation of mana every day, even though it was not an easy task, because he was eager to adapt to this new circle and implement it as effectively as possible. For when he had formed the second circle of mana at the age of 12, he had been Shin Ha-yeoled as a genius, and his father had begun to place high hopes upon him. Yet now he possessed only one circle of mana, and it resided in his brain, and he wondered how he could advance further in his magical progress, because overcoming the formidable wall of enlightenment was absolutely essential, and his father had once told him that the ideal was nothing more than shackles, that the ideal was an illusion created by human arrogance, and that in the end, the ideal turned out to be a lie. Continuing his meditation and recalling these words, he suddenly felt how the mana in his hands, in his fingers, in his heart, and even in his head moved precisely as he willed it, and at that moment a small flame lit up in his hand, and he considered this to be a significant moment of perfection, because he realized that freedom of imagination was the key to magic, as it allowed him to embody spells without the need for any fixed formulas. For while interactive magic shortened the speed of casting spells, it also embedded a monotonous pattern into each incantation, whereas the Vader method was as unbridled as thought itself, and by using his vivid imagination, he created images of birds formed entirely from the dancing flames that circled around the room, and he smiled with delight, because he now understood that he could freely alter the shape of magic, and that magic was no longer constrained by any rigid algorithm or predetermined form. As he clenched his hand into a fist in triumph, he used the magic circle in his brain, and this act caused the mana to circulate freely throughout his entire body, all thanks to the powerful infinity circle that had been carefully established within him. And as a result, the dormant power that had lain hidden for so long was finally released in a magnificent surge. And he spread his arms out to the sides and conjured a new magic circle directly in front of him, from which brilliant, vibrant flames erupted with force and intensity, and his mouth opened wide in pure surprise because the display was beyond what he had ever anticipated. Yet Rael, ever the calm and wise mentor, said to him in a measured tone that he should not be surprised by such phenomena, because he had an entire journey of learning and discovery ahead of him, and that the infinity circle was merely the base, the fundamental essence, of the weight inner style of magic that enabled him to cast spells precisely as he imagined them in his mind. The image of his teacher, who had once patted him on the head and then waved his hand in a gesture of approval, came back to him vividly as the teacher had explained that the incredible feat he had just performed was only the first circle of the weight inner style of magic, a method known as the call of the heart, and Shin Ha-yeol felt a deep sense of pride that he could already perform such impressive magic at the very first circle, and with this realization he continued his training with relentless dedication, pushing the boundaries of what he believed possible. For although interactive magic might shorten the speed of casting spells, It also imposed a monotonous pattern upon each spell, whereas the Vader method was as wild and unbridled as thought itself. And by harnessing the power of his imagination, he created ethereal birds from the dancing flames that circled gracefully around the room. And he smiled with delight as he realized that he could now change the very shape of magic at will, for it was no longer bound by any algorithm or predetermined form, and he clenched his hand into a determined fist. In that remarkable moment, as he continued to harness the power of his brain and channel the mana through the infinity circle, his entire body resonated with an energy that he had never before experienced, and the power surged within him like a living force that obeyed his every command, and he felt a deep sense of fulfillment and joy, knowing that he had taken a major step forward in his journey to master the ancient arts of magic. And even though there were still many challenges ahead, he was emboldened by the realization that he now possessed the ability to shape magic freely with his imagination, and that the traditional constraints of interactive magic were no longer sufficient to contain the vast potential that lay within him. And this new freedom filled him with hope and determination to continue advancing and surpassing the limits that had once held him back. Thus, as he strode down the street with a light heart and a steady smile, humming softly to himself, he believed that the legend of his magical prowess had truly begun. In that moment, the potential of his magic shone brighter than any physical exhaustion, and his mind was already set on the glorious future that awaited him. A new day dawned, and while he was sitting in class, the teacher entered the classroom and called out to him, informing him that he had a guest, and asking him to follow. The teacher gently set aside his books and led him through the corridors of the school until they reached the reception area, where a knock sounded on the door. A voice from within the room granted them permission to enter, and the door was opened by a man who announced that he had come with Shin Ha-yeol. His father, Shin In-hak, then turned to him, and in that quiet moment, Shin Ha-yeol greeted his father with warmth and a slight wave of his hand, a gesture that was enough to signal to the teacher that the two should be left alone to speak privately. Once they were seated opposite each other, the father spoke first and said that he had noticed that his son had not yet given up on attending classes, and that was the reason he had not accepted the pill that he had sent him. The weight of his father's words pressed upon him as he listened silently, before Shin Ha-yeol confirmed his father's observation and explained that he had recently achieved a remarkable feat in magic. His father frowned and asked if he was still chasing empty dreams, and his confident reply was that he intended to become the greatest magician of his generation. For a long moment, his father studied his eyes in silence before he sighed and said that he had already lost an entire year, and that it was time for him to finally accept reality, no matter how hard he worked, even if he achieved something in the future. As long as his body remained incompatible with interactive magic, he would never become a real mage. His father continued by saying that at least he had an extraordinary talent left, and that he should give up those meaningless ideals and study theory properly, for that would be the best use of his talent. Shin Ha-yeol objected firmly and reminded his father of the promise he had made long ago that he would never give up magic. After rising from the couch, he declared that an ordinary life held no appeal for him, especially if it meant living forever in the shadow of others. He clenched his hand into a fist as he proclaimed that his true desire was to lead a house of magic. His father paused for a moment as he considered his son's passionate words, and then remarked that becoming a great mage, or the head of a family of mages, was not something that could be achieved by wishful thinking alone. Shin Ha-yeol responded that he would prove his worth in practice. His father then questioned under what circumstances he would prove it, wondering if barely passing the academy tests and being on the verge of expulsion would be enough as proof of his ability. His son replied with unwavering confidence that he would be ranked in the top 10 on the next test, and that if he failed to do so, he would leave the academy and devote himself entirely to the study of theory, as his father wished. With a determined smile, he patted his own chest and said that if he succeeded, he wanted his father to acknowledge him as a true mage and to offer him the appropriate support. His father sighed tiredly and closed his eyes as he remarked that it seemed as if all of his so-called successes had completely gone to his head. Before throwing his cloak over his shoulder, he headed for the exit, saying that he hoped deep in his heart that all of this was not merely empty talk. Shin Ha-yeol frowned slightly in silent protest and remained quiet for the rest of their conversation. A few days later, the teacher announced that the final exam format had been officially approved. The students began to whisper among themselves, wondering what would happen during the exam. The teacher explained that the exam would consist of one-on-one fights. In other words, it would be a series of duels between students. Shin Ha-yeol frowned slightly, while Shin Ha-yeol looked at him with a smirk as the teacher continued. His words carried the promise of high stakes as he explained that the test would last for 3 days and that starting from the 16th round the official representatives of the Magic Tower would be invited as observers, urging the students to give it their all. That announcement filled the room with an air of anticipation and intensity. After the teacher finished speaking, Shin Ha-yeol clenched his fist and thought with a serious look that it was time to prove himself. The break between classes was filled with excited chatter as groups of students crowded together discussing the upcoming exam. One student mentioned that even people from the Magic Towers would come to observe, and that was a sign of how high the stakes were at this point. Shin Ha-yeol, however, as always, kept to himself and turned his attention away from the crowd, even as the entire academy buzzed with excitement about the midterms and the arrival of the tower representatives. He felt a calm determination within him, for he knew that the Magic Tower was an international organization of magicians created by a dozen of the very best, whose strength was said to rival that of an entire country, and every student at the academy was eager to join its ranks. He thought with a smile that although this was only the first circle, it consumed his stamina mercilessly, yet the very possibility of harnessing such incredible magic made every shortcoming worthwhile. He knew that after he overcame the wall of enlightenment, he would ascend to the greatest heights. The thought of using such magic filled him with anticipation and the promise of a future where he could command power beyond measure. The idea that he might one day lead a house of magic spurred him on with a fervor that burned deep within his heart. The day at school progressed slowly as the students prepared themselves mentally for the challenges ahead. The final exam was looming, and the pressure was palpable in every whispered conversation and every determined glance. The teacher's announcement about the exam had set the entire academy abuzz, and although some students exchanged nervous smiles, others seemed to revel in the prospect of such a high-stake test for Shin Ha-yeol. The test was more than just an exam, it was the next step in his journey toward greatness. Later that afternoon, as he sat in class, his thoughts drifted back to the conversation with his father and the passionate promise he had made to prove his worth. His mind replayed the image of his clenched fist and the resolute look in his eyes as he declared his ambition to lead a house of magic. That determination was the fuel that drove him even as he listened to the teacher drone on about mundane details of the curriculum. His heart was focused on the future and on the possibilities that lay ahead if he could overcome every obstacle in his path. The exam was not merely a test of magical skill, but a trial of character and perseverance. The thought that the Magic Tower representatives would soon be observing their every move added to the pressure, but also served as a beacon of hope for every student who dreamed of rising above mediocrity. The opportunity to be noticed by such powerful figures was a chance to change their fate. In the midst of all this, Shin Ha-yeol's mind was fixed on his goal of not only surviving the exam, but excelling in it, so that his extraordinary talent would be recognized by those who mattered. In the quiet moments before the exam, the academy was filled with an undercurrent of tension and expectation. Groups of students whispered excitedly while others practiced their spells in secluded corners. Shin Ha-yeol, however, maintained a calm demeanor as he continued to hone his skills in secret. He knew that his success would not come from idle chatter or mere wishful thinking, but from relentless dedication and hard work. Each moment of practice brought him closer to mastering the delicate balance of mana that flowed through his veins, and each spell he cast was a step toward unlocking the full potential of his magic. The Magic Tower represented the pinnacle of magical achievement, and every student in the academy harbored dreams of one day being recognized by its esteemed members. Its reputation as an international organization of unparalleled power made it the ultimate goal for any aspiring mage. For Shin Ha-yeol, the idea of joining such an organization was both a dream and a challenge that he was determined to meet with every ounce of strength he possessed. The media attention that was expected to follow the midterm exam only added to the excitement and pressure. He could already imagine the headlines and the fervor of the public eye as the representatives of the Magic Tower scrutinized every move made by the students of the academy. In that charged atmosphere, Shin Ha-yeol's thoughts turned back to the nature of his magic and the incredible journey that lay before him. The initial consumption of stamina by the first circle was merely the beginning, and he knew that as he advanced through the circles, his power would only grow. More importantly, he had learned that every trial he faced was a necessary step toward overcoming the invisible wall of enlightenment that separated him from the true mastery of magic. His determination was unwavering, even when the very process of channeling mana for extended periods left him physically drained, yet somehow he did not feel the exhaustion that theory had predicted. Throughout the day, his mind oscillated between memories of his father's stern words and the burning desire to prove that he was capable of transcending the limitations imposed upon him by his body. His father's pragmatic advice to devote himself to theory instead of chasing what he considered to be empty dreams clashed with Shin Ha-yeol's unyielding ambition to become the greatest magician of his generation. That internal conflict was a constant reminder of the delicate balance between following one's heart and heeding practical wisdom. As the day drew to a close, the academy buzzed with anticipation for the upcoming final exam. The atmosphere was thick with expectation, and every student seemed to be preparing in their own way for the trials ahead. MC2 retreated into a quiet corner of his room to meditate and gather his thoughts. His mind was filled with images of magic circles and swirling mana, and as he closed his eyes, he visualized his future where every barrier was shattered, and he stood triumphant as a leader among magicians. In that deep silence, he recalled the passionate words exchanged with his father and the promise he had made to prove himself not just through academic tests, but by becoming a true master of magic. His resolve was as strong as the ancient spells he had practiced, and every beat of his heart echoed with a desire to rewrite his destiny. With a determined spirit, he vowed that the next test would not be a measure of his failures, but a testament to his extraordinary potential. If he succeeded, he would force his father to acknowledge him as a true mage and provide him with the support he needed to continue his ascent. That evening, as the sun set over the academy, the cool night air brought with it a sense of calm and introspection. The corridors were quiet, and the students had mostly retired for the night, but the anticipation for the exam still lingered in every whispered thought and every shadowed glance in the darkness. Shin Ha-yeol lay awake for a long time contemplating the journey ahead and the sacrifices that would be required to achieve greatness in his heart. The burning desire to lead a house of magic burned brighter than ever, even as the obstacles before him loomed large. The magic tower and its representatives represented not just a goal, but a symbol of the highest order of magical achievement, and as long as the academy thrummed with excitement over the upcoming midterms, Shin Ha-yeol knew that every moment of struggle was forging him into the mage he was destined to become. The prospect of the media attention, the rigorous tests, and the fierce competition only served to galvanize his spirit further and imbued him with a fierce determination to push beyond the limits of what was deemed possible. In that silent night, Shin Ha-yeol made a solemn vow to himself that no matter the hardships or the criticisms, he would continue to chase his dreams with relentless vigor, and that one day he would rise above the mundane limitations of his body and prove that true magic was born not from the mere application of technology, but from the raw, unbridled power of human will and imagination. His journey was not just about mastering spells, but about redefining what it meant to be a mage in an era where ancient traditions and modern innovations clashed in a battle for supremacy. Thus, with the promise of a new day and the memory of his father's cautious words echoing in his mind, Shin Ha-yeol prepared to face the coming challenges with a heart full of hope and a mind determined to overcome every obstacle. In his eyes burned the fierce light of ambition, and in his soul the quiet certainty that his legend had only just begun, and that one day his name would be spoken with reverence among the greatest magicians of all time, and the halls of the magic tower would echo with the legacy of a true master whose journey defied the constraints of both body and fate. Shin Ha-yeol suddenly approached Shin Ha-yeol with a sneer on his face and wasted no time in hurling insults at him while asking in a derisive tone how he felt. At that very moment, Shin Ha-yeol felt a slight frown cross his face as he regarded Shin Ha-yeol with mixed annoyance and recognition of his own status as one of the top second-year students, even though Shin Ha-yeol was known for his abrasive manner and overbearing confidence. Shin Ha-yeol moved even closer, so that his face was nearly inches from Shin Ha-yeol's, and in a threatening manner remarked that it appeared he would soon be his opponent in the first duel of the midterm exams, and he taunted him by asking if he could already taste defeat, while his voice dripped with contempt, and he added that he would set a record just as he had done in an incident 5 years ago when their fates had first intertwined in a humiliating manner. Shin Ha-yeol sighed tiredly, and his eyes darkened with memories, as he recalled that long-ago incident during the finals of a talent competition, when that same rival had suffered a crushing defeat at his hands, and had even been reduced to tears in the arena, a moment that had earned Shin Ha-yeol a reputation as a loser, and had since driven him to relentlessly bully Shin Ha-yeol. Ever since it had become known that Shin Ha-yeol was incompatible with interactive magic, Shin Ha-yeol continued his verbal assault with a smug expression on his face, and in a mocking tone he remarked that since the midterm exam rule stated that whoever failed would be expelled, he might as well knock Shin Ha-yeol out now, so that he would not be forced to witness his impending failure. His words were met with laughter from his friends who joined him in jeering, and they all told him to get ready to cry into his pillow. MC, perceiving this idiot as his first opponent, recognized that this moment presented an ideal opportunity to showcase his skills in the midterms, and he resolved to take full advantage of it. In response to Shin Ha-yeol's provocations, he smirked and retorted with cool confidence that there was no reason for him to be afraid of such challenges, much to Shin Ha-yeol's chagrin, who did not expect such a defiant reply from his rival. And in a fit of anger, Shin Ha-yeol's face turned red, and he shouted in a loud voice in front of all the other students who had begun whispering and exchanging glances that this defective person truly believed he could handle him, and he accused Shin Ha-yeol of deceiving himself by failing to understand his proper place in their hierarchy, as he twirled his finger at his temple and declared that Shin Ha-yeol was completely crazy. Shin Ha-yeol took a deep, steadying breath, and then rubbed his chin as a small smile crept across his face, and he reminded Shin Ha-yeol that 5 years ago Shin Ha-yeol himself had hurled similar insults at him, yet had lost miserably and had failed to learn anything from that defeat, a recollection that served to shame Shin Ha-yeol into silence and prompted Shin Ha-yeol to laugh softly as he asked whether Shin Ha-yeol was still bitter about that long-ago loss, recalling that back then Shin Ha-yeol had been branded a loser, a term that now stung his pride even more. Shin Ha-yeol then stepped forward and, in a moment of heated emotion, grabbed Shin Ha-yeol by the collar and shouted that he was nothing more than a defective piece of trash. Shin Ha-yeol flung his hand dismissively and retorted that living in the shadow of others meant one would never be able to change, and that there would always be someone stronger who would trample one into the dirt. Shin Ha-yeol straightened his collar and with an arrogant smile declared that geniuses always remain geniuses, and that he would soon confirm those very words on his own skin, so that Shin Ha-yeol should prepare himself for what was to come, after which Shin Ha-yeol turned and decided to leave, while Shin Ha-yeol stood there watching him and began to nervously bite his nails, muttering to himself that he would one day burn this arrogant idiot to ashes and then walk proudly on his remains. The very next day, articles about the return of the genius began to appear on the internet, and the headlines boldly proclaimed the name of Shin Ha, the fallen genius of a famous house of magic, leaving many to wonder whether he would be rehabilitated or if they were about to witness his final downfall. While he was drying his wet hair with a towel, Shin Ha-yeol looked at the screen of his tablet with a sense of satisfaction and quiet amusement as he noticed that the headlines were filled with his own name, and he suspected that Shin Ha-yeol's family must have gone to great lengths to contact the journalists and influence the story, so that the media would now recognize his achievements. Shin Ha-yeol remembered the memory of Shin Ha-yeol's face, distorted with rage from their previous encounter, and he mused that it was obvious these midterms would serve as the ultimate test to show everyone that a genius would always prevail, and that the more attention he attracted, the better his reputation would grow. Suddenly, as if summoned by fate, his phone rang and he answered it, promptly greeting his father in a warm, respectful tone and asking if he had seen the article, while his father confirmed that he had indeed read it, and with a smirk told him not to pay too much attention to the media's chatter. In-hak then inquired whether Shin Ha-yeol had provoked this situation himself, and Shin Ha-yeol confirmed that he had acted deliberately to attract the attention of the public. His father replied in a measured tone that just because Shin Ha-yeol agreed to such conditions did not mean that he truly believed in his own victory, and that the House of Magic did not take his claims seriously even now, and that these articles only brought shame upon the venerable institution, for they could not understand why Shin Ha-yeol needed all this publicity. MC explained calmly that people had already written him off as excommunicated from the House of Magic, and that he felt no greater loss than what his detractors had conspired to create. He ran his hand over the ancient book that had become the symbol of his magical journey and offered a quiet apology on behalf of their family, saying that any damage inflicted upon their reputation would hardly matter in the grand scheme of things, even if the public opinion was skewed by baseless articles and malicious intent. As the day progressed, Shin Ha-yeol's mind continued to churn with thoughts of the earlier confrontation and the media attention that now followed him like a shadow. He recalled the heated words exchanged between him and Shin Ha-yeol and the bitter memory of his earlier talent competition loss, which had long since been transformed into fuel for his determination despite the cruel taunts, the harsh laughter of his rivals, and the biting insults that had been flung his way. Shin Ha-yeol felt a quiet resolve building within him that these midterms would be his opportunity to demonstrate that he was not defined by past failures, but by his unwavering ambition and talent. Throughout the day, whispers spread among the students in the academy about the impending midterm duel, and many speculated about the potential outcomes of the contest, with some saying that the upcoming test would decide the fate of those who dared to challenge the established order, and even the representatives of the Magic Tower were rumored to be watching intently, waiting for a spark that would ignite a revolution in magical prowess. MC, however, remained largely silent and introspective. His thoughts focused on the challenge ahead and the memory of Shin Ha-yeol's venomous words, which stung like a whip and drove him to prove that he was capable of far more than anyone had expected. In the quiet moments between classes, Shin Ha-yeol sat by himself in a secluded corner of the academy, meditating on the events of the past and visualizing the midterm duel as an opportunity to reclaim his honor and demonstrate his unique mastery of magic despite the weight of his reputation and the bitter history that had long since been written between him and Shin Ha-yeol. He recalled how, 5 years ago, during a final in a talent competition, the tables had been turned against Shin Ha-yeol, who had been reduced to tears in the arena and labeled a loser, a moment that had set the stage for the relentless bullying he would later endure at the hands of Shin Ha-yeol and his cronies, but now, fueled by both painful memories and an unyielding desire for redemption, Shin Ha-yeol resolved that he would not let those old wounds define his future, and that he would prove once and for all that true genius was not measured by defeat, but by the ability to rise again from the ashes of humiliation. The memory of that long-ago competition was vivid in his mind, a reminder that every hardship, every insult, and every moment of despair was a stepping stone toward a brighter future. And as he closed his eyes, he envisioned the upcoming duel in precise detail, imagining every movement, every spell, and every burst of raw magical energy that would be unleashed in the arena. He saw himself standing tall and confident, his magic surging forth in a display that would leave no doubt as to his superiority, and in that vision he could almost hear the collective gasp of the audience as they witnessed a genius in full flow. The midterm duel, so that he would not have to suffer the disgrace of witnessing another loss, and his friends, caught up in the fervor of his rage, joined in with raucous laughter and crude taunts, urging him to prepare for a crushing defeat that would be etched in their memories for years to come. Soon the day of the midterm exams arrived, and everyone gathered in a small stadium where spectators and journalists took their places in the stands, while Shin Ha-yeol walked out into the arena at the center of the stadium. He stretched his wrist and noticed a familiar face that grinned in a manner that suggested the person was curious to know how he felt about the article that had been published. The popularity of the so-called genius had skyrocketed in one day, and Shin Ha-yeol quietly laughed as he remarked to himself that although he could not even cast a spell properly, he nevertheless continued to embarrass himself in front of everyone with his awkward laughter and nothing more. Shin Ha-yeol smiled and replied to himself that he would be the only one who would end up embarrassed here. He was slightly surprised by this turn of events, and MC, with his hand pressed firmly on his chest, thanked him for falling into his trap obediently because he did not like that person, and he felt that this was the least he could do, as he resolved to beat him up quickly so that he would not have a chance to whine later. Later, Shin Ha-yeol let out a chuckle and exclaimed that Shin Ha-yeol was truly crazy, and then extended his index finger and pointed at him as he stated that the spells of the first circle would be sufficient to defeat him. The spectators in the stands became interested by this challenge, and his opponent gritted his teeth and began to bite his nails in nervous anticipation as he silently wondered how it was possible for Shin Ha-yeol to speak with such confidence. Soon after, the instructor entered the arena and positioned himself between the two opponents and raised his hand while announcing that the first round of the midterm exams for the second years was about to begin. He blew his whistle to signal the start, and Shin Ha-yeol smiled confidently as his opponent put his hand forward while calling Shin Ha-yeol a defective idiot and wishing him death. In that moment, Shin Ha-yeol's eyes sparkled as streams of flame gushed out from the system window in front of him and merged into one large fireball that sped toward him. He easily dodged the fireball and wondered to himself if this was his opponent's signature ability known as explosion. The chip on the back of Shin Ha-yeol's head sparked as he activated the third circle spell called Explosion once again, and his opponent smiled as if he were beginning to enjoy the fight. A powerful stream of flame hit the middle of the arena, and a roar was heard while voices and the clicking of cameras resonated from the stands. Confident in his impending victory, Shin Ha-yeol smirked and said that he had no reason to pretend to be omnipotent. However, when the dust was finally blown away by the wind, his eyes widened in surprise as he saw that Shin Ha-yeol remained unharmed. He began to grow nervous and swiftly summoned 3 system windows at once as he fired 3 fireballs at his opponent. At that moment, MC, with a look of confidence, created a water ball above his palm and then waved his hand upward from the bottom to raise a barrier above his head that protected him from the oncoming flames. Shin Ha-yeol started to worry greatly as he thought that his favorite spell Explosion had been blocked so easily. While Shin Ha-yeol was busy worrying and trying to salvage his reputation in the midst of the fight, the master of the Blue Magic Tower known as the Eighth Circle Magician Kim Ken-jin was watching the contest from a special room. He became very interested in Shin Ha-yeol and said with a puzzled expression that he could not understand how a mere First Circle magician was able to use his magic so easily in a matter of seconds. A woman standing next to Kim Ken-jin then remarked that she was wondering why he would postpone his business at the Blue Tower simply to watch the second year's midterm exams, and asked if he knew anything about Shin Ha-yeol's magic. He replied that he did not know much, and that he had only seen an article about a kid who was being Shin Ha-yeoled as the return of a genius. Enoch had earlier mentioned that although the damage to the House of Magic might seem insignificant, it was not non-existent, and that no matter what Shin Ha-yeol did or where he went, the legacy of the house would always follow him. Shin Ha-yeol's face had grown serious at those words, and he had acknowledged that he knew of the damage but dismissed those concerns as empty worries compared to the enormous benefits he would bring. When his father had then questioned him about the specific benefits for the House of Magic arising from his victory, Shin Ha-yeol had answered with unwavering confidence that the greatest benefit was embodied in his very self. Because the greatest mage in the world would emerge from the house, and the greatest head of the family in history was destined to be him even by the family's own exacting standards. Seated on a chair, his father had remarked that his ambitions were as high as those of the Tower Master, and that nothing should deter him from his path. Shin Ha-yeol had expressed his gratitude for these words of support. However, his father had then warned him sternly that if he continued to defame the family in his pursuit of personal glory, he should prepare himself for the inevitable consequences. After ending that difficult call, Shin Ha-yeol had set the phone on the table and sat on his bed while smiling softly as he declared that the bets were off. On the day of the midterm exams, the entire student body had gathered in a modest stadium where spectators and journalists took their places in the stands. Shin Ha-yeol strode out into the arena at the center of the stadium and stretched his wrist as he observed the bustling environment around him. In that moment, he recalled the heated exchange from the previous day, and he silently smiled to himself as he noted how the so-called genius had become the subject of a widely read article that had skyrocketed his popularity in a single day. With quiet laughter, he mused that even though his opponent could not even cast spells properly, he nevertheless persisted in embarrassing himself in front of everyone. Shin Ha-yeol then smiled in reply and confidently stated that he would be the only one who would end up embarrassed that day. He was slightly surprised by this retort. An MC, with his hand pressed firmly on his chest, expressed his thanks for having lured his opponent into the trap that had been set. He did not like Shin Ha-yeol at all and felt that this was the very least he could do. He intended to defeat him quickly so that Shin Ha-yeol would not have the chance to complain later. Soon after, Shin Ha-yeol let out a mocking chuckle and exclaimed that Shin Ha-yeol was truly crazy while extending his index finger as he declared that the spells of the first circle would be enough to overcome him. The spectators became even more interested as they watched the confrontation intensify, and his opponent gritted his teeth and bit his nails in nervous agitation, while silently questioning how Shin Ha-yeol could speak so boldly. Later that day, as Shin Ha-yeol prepared for the duel and the eyes of the spectators and journalists were fixed upon him, he felt the weight of his destiny pressing upon him. He recalled his father's words and the promise he had made to himself that he would not allow his past humiliations or the scorn of his rivals to define his future. With every spell he had mastered and every drop of mana he had honed through relentless training, he was determined to show that true genius was forged in the crucible of adversity. As he stood in the arena, ready to face his opponent Shin Ha-yeol felt a surge of confidence, knowing that his mastery of even the first circle magic was more than enough to overcome the challenges before him. Thus, as the midterm duel commenced and flames and water clashed in a spectacular display of magical prowess, Shin Ha-yeol moved with precision and determination, while Shin Ha-yeol's anger and anxiety grew with every thwarted attack. The arena filled with the roars of the crowd and the clicks of cameras, while every observer witnessed a battle that was not merely a test of magical ability, but a contest of pride and honor. In that moment, Shin Ha-yeol silently vowed that his victory would not only silence the bitter insults of his rival, but would also confirm that the true benefit of the House of Magic was embodied in his own unmatched talent. Even as his father's stern warnings and the media's harsh words echoed in his mind, Shin Ha-yeol remained steadfast in his belief that the greatest mage would rise above the petty confines of tradition and that his own legend was just beginning to be written. And as the duel reached its climax and the sparks of magic lit up the arena, Shin Ha-yeol's unwavering resolve and skill shone brightly for all to see, while Shin Ha-yeol, overcome with nervousness and disbelief, realized too late that he had underestimated his opponent. In that defining moment, the destiny of the House of Magic was being rewritten by the hands of a true genius who refused to be bound by the past and who was determined to lead his family to unprecedented heights of glory and honor.
Hyrule activated the core spell sequence. A dense vortex of wind formed, circling his body with force. As the mana synchronized perfectly, Hyrule's eyes sharpened. He adjusted the flow, maximizing both speed and control. Concentrated wind condensed at his fingertips, evolving into a spear streamlined, enhanced, and embedded with ancient casting patterns. He launched the spear across the arena. It accelerated unnaturally, cutting through barriers and defying expected trajectories. The opposing mage panicked, scanning data screens. He couldn't understand the structure. It surpassed modern elemental classification theory. Hyrule analyzed the prior casting delay. He smirked, calculating how to further increase the spell output. He bypassed standard limitations again, weaving a second and third spear simultaneously. Pressure building across the arena. Without pause, he summoned a fourth. The wind current intensified. 4 spears spun tightly around him. The opponent detected danger too late. Blue circuits formed underfoot as he hastily deployed a defensive barrier. The spears collided violently with the barrier. It flickered, trembled, then fractured under the overwhelming force delivered. The older mage smirked nervously, realizing Hyrule's power wasn't brute force, it was precision and adaptability. He lunged sideways to escape, reacting fast, but the incoming pressure suggested a miscalculation in spear angles. Eyes widened. One of the wind spears twisted midair, curving sharply toward his exposed flank. Hyrule observed him closely, unfazed. He reminded his opponent that overthinking wouldn't stop the incoming strikes. With calm control, Hyrule summoned more wind spears. Each hovered in formation, waiting for his silent command. Hyrule launched more spears, guiding them smoothly. His opponent dashed aside, barely avoiding the circling wind force. Frustrated, the older mage cursed. He understood that staying close meant being trapped by Hyrule's control radius. He sprinted toward the arena's edge, hoping distance would reduce Hyrule's pressure and slow future strikes. From afar, he calculated Hyrule's casting range. Less proximity might equal more time to counter incoming projectiles. Hyrule watched quietly, acknowledging the tactic. He smiled faintly, impressed his opponent finally chose something reasonable. Hyrule clasped his hands, stabilizing mana flow. The wind spears sharpened, condensing into a single formation. The spears accelerated it instantly, leaving a glowing trail as they surged toward the retreating mage's current position. Caught mid-step, the older mage turned in panic. He had misjudged the range and timing completely. A direct hit shattered his barrier. He screamed as force and wind blasted him into the wall. A silent observer watched from above. The outcome was clear. Hyrule had decisively controlled the entire match. A blonde observer narrowed his eyes, closely analyzing the unusual merge pattern of the airborne wind spears. He questioned the logic. Wind shouldn't bend and synchronize like that. It defied common principles of elemental magic. Another man stepped forward, recognized by many. Calm and stern, he was addressed with great formality. He was Shin In-hyuk, head of the Meidoshin family, known for mastering 8-circle magic structures. A staff member confirmed his identity with surprise. Shin In-hyuk's presence meant the duel held deeper weight. The system analyzed the spell Reverse Cutter. Data showed speed, angle constraints, and limitations during redirection phase. Reverse Cutter could only target specific positions. If missed, its locked trajectory made reactivation impossible without reset. Analysts noted modern spells followed rigid rules like game functions, each spell coded with fixed inputs and behaviors. Strategic players used angles, buffs, and casting zones like game mechanics, relying on data-driven spell optimization. But Hyrule's magic ignored preset logic. He used by-tenor-style casting freestyle manipulation beyond modern system constraints. The impact from Hyrule's final strike cracked the arena floor, sending debris and energy in every direction. The older mage collapsed, breath unsteady. He questioned how he lost against what seemed like basic spells. Hyrule stepped forward, calm and firm. He explained that misunderstanding spell rank led to false confidence and failure. Even a weak-looking spell, if precise and relentless, could end a fight before rank became relevant. The defeated mage struggled to process Hyrule's logic. It challenged everything taught in modern structured magic theory. Hyrule calmly activated a simple water spell. He held it up, stating its classification only first circle. He launched the spell directly. Though basic, its precision and placement targeted the opponent's vulnerable breathing path. The mage choked as the water wrapped around his face. Panic set in from sudden suffocation. Hyrule clarified that fatal spells didn't require size or flash, only correct timing, angle, and intent mattered. He reminded everyone that academy duels included protection spells. Without safety zones, real outcomes would be fatal. The water spell held firm. The mage struggled on the ground, helpless under a basic control technique. The stadium buzzed. Spectators murmured, recognizing the unexpected strength behind Hyul's simple yet devastatingly effective approach. Hyul stood calmly in the center, composed. His duel tactics contradicted every known standard combat model taught. With a slight breath, he addressed the referee, suggesting the outcome was already more than obvious. The instructor nodded, acknowledging the result. Hyul's performance had decisively surpassed all expectations set for the match. The match ended with thunderous cheers. The announcer officially declared Shin Hyul as the clear winner. Applause echoed throughout the stadium. Hyul's unexpected tactics had overwhelmed both his opponent and the audience. Quietly, Hyul walked toward the exit. His academy emblem glowed faintly on the back of his uniform. He clenched his fist slightly. A silent acknowledgement this kind of victory hadn't happened in a while. As he raised his arm, the crowd celebrated. Hyul stood alone, recalling the thrill of recognition. Hyul clenched his fist with conviction. After long rejection, he was finally acknowledged as a true mage. Dark fragments representing his past doubts faded. He silently let go of the pain he had carried. Elsewhere, instructors walked silently through the academy corridor, murmuring about the implications of the duel's outcome. A young observer watched from above. He noted Hyul's victory and muttered about a prodigy's return. With glowing eyes, he grinned slightly. Hyul's presence had stirred something deeper curiosity, and perhaps future conflict. Junho ran over, calling out excitedly. He had watched the match and couldn't hide his amazement. He grabbed Hyul's shoulders, asking how he trained. Junho's enthusiasm overflowed with curiosity and admiration. Junho gestured animatedly, describing how the wind spears curved and combined midair with perfect control. Hyul tilted his head and smirked slightly, teasing Junho with a question. "Do you really want details?" Without hesitation, Junho shouted yes. His wide grin showed genuine excitement, eager to hear everything Hyul had learned. Hyul smirked, closing the ancient grimoire. He gave no explanation. His true technique would remain hidden. Hyul and Junho looked at the screen. News about the duel had already spread academy-wide overnight. The headline highlighted the prodigy's return. Hyul read calmly, unfazed by the sudden wave of attention. As students gathered, they discussed his magic. Many questioned how his spells moved unpredictably mid-air. Hyul overheard them and smiled slightly. He knew the answer but chose not to explain everything. Before he could respond, an official entered. "I'll answer that question for you," the man said. Hyul sensed a presence and turned. A man approached confidently, surrounded by murmurs and curious eyes. It was Kim Kangen, Lord of Blue Tower. He praised Hyul's match and showed direct interest. Standing beside Hyul, Kangen claimed the match technique resembled an advanced spell, the 8-circle incantation, Memorize. The crowd whispered as Kangen demonstrated a glowing flame. His example spell drew instant attention from everyone. Spectators reacted with awe. The visual display confirmed Kangen's theory, and tension filled the room quietly. Kangen explained that Memorize lets mages store a spell in advance and recast it instantly later. He emphasized that instant casting is powerful, but the spell comes with specific limitations by design. Memorize can only store spells 3 circles below the caster's level, restricting its usefulness under certain conditions. Hyul nodded slightly, confirming the theory. Kangen used the explanation to transition toward Bite-Tenor-style spellcraft principles. A spectator realized the implication. Hyul must be capable of at least 4-circle magic to use it. Kangen proudly confirmed Hyul's magical tier. With laughter, he vouched for the student's exceptional casting capability. The crowd erupted in cheers. Word spread fast. Hyul had surpassed typical academy limits for his age. Reporters called it a scoop. Reaching 4-circle magic so young rivaled achievements of historical tower lords. Hyul's calm demeanor contrasted the uproar. Spectators watched in awe as his wind magic surged effortlessly again. Junho leaned in and whispered curiously, "Are you really a 4-circle mage?" Hyul just smiled slightly. Junho and Kangen pointed out specific spell behavior. They both wanted to understand how Hyul achieved it. Kangen stepped back, smiling confidently. He offered to explain, eager to clarify what everyone had witnessed. Before Kangen continued, Hyul interrupted. He said mastering unconventional casting was simple if rules were intentionally broken. Hyul casually stated he had modified the spell formula. Everyone listening paused, unsure how to react. Kangen's eyes widened. The idea of altering a base spell structure was nearly unthinkable in modern theory. As Hyul demonstrated his flight spell, Kangen quietly reflected on Hyul's strength despite magical system incompatibility. Kangen admitted Hyul's potential could have been limitless if he had matched modern magic system compatibility standards. Hyul raised a glowing butterfly-shaped construct, naming his approach Modification Magic, inspired by his altered casting formula. Spectators watched as blue butterflies burst from his mana. signaling a completely new path in spellcraft. In the shadows, another observer smirked. Hyul's rise had clearly begun to draw serious attention. Hyul released the butterflies. His new path modification magic was now known across the Academy's growing audience. The magical community felt a ripple. From this moment, spellcasting rules would no longer stay unchanged. Junho read the news headline in disbelief. Modification magic? He struggled to believe what he witnessed. Hyul confirmed it casually. They joked for a moment before Junho congratulated him again on the win. As they parted ways, Hyul nodded slightly. He returned to his dorm, calm after a defining day. Junho waved as he left the room. He said tomorrow's opponent would be unusually difficult to face. Hyul tilted his head slightly. The phrase tough opponent lingered in his mind with quiet curiosity. A new day arrived. The wind stirred above Obelisk Stadium as students filled the stands again. Seats were packed. Everyone waited, sensing today's battle would carry significance beyond just a training match. Junho stood inside the arena, focused. His gaze burned with intent, ready for whatever came next. Junho knelt, catching his breath. He had just lost, and his opponent stood confidently before him. Watching from above, Hyul realized the tough opponent Junho mentioned was not a man but her. She stepped forward with grace, golden hair flowing. Her mana already began forming behind her stance. Her name, Adela Sterret. She commanded refined control and power from both European and Korean mystic legacies. She raised her hand, magic surging. Her expression was calm, but her aura demanded absolute respect immediately. Hyul analyzed quietly. He noticed Adela's spells had unusual structure, something fundamentally different from most advanced casters. Her casting drew from a rare source, the moon element, hidden within the House of Mystics. A glowing circle expanded below her. Its markings pulsed gently, amplifying her control and magical precision. She released the energy. It surged forward at high speed, impossible to intercept with basic defense. The impact struck directly. Junho tumbled backward across the arena floor, unable to resist the force. The referee raised their hand. With an official call, the match was declared over without objection. Adela stood tall. Her victory confirmed. Her calm confidence contrasted with the overwhelming power just displayed. From the stands, Hyul observed silently. He took special interest in the nature of her techniques. Her moonlight magic, a blend of light and shadow, remained undocumented within public magical system frameworks. The House of Mystics kept it hidden. Range, power, structure, none were known beyond the original lineage. Hyul sat back, analyzing quietly. Watching Adela's magic firsthand, he admitted facing her wouldn't be easy. Adela turned slightly, scanning the crowd. Her eyes met his briefly with unreadable intent and calm. Hyul straightened up, surprised. He wondered if her glance held meaning, or if it was coincidence. He questioned silently, unsure if she had truly noticed him or simply scanned the arena aimlessly. Meanwhile, Junho returned defeated. Hyul offered him a simple good job. Junho grumbled, drained but still smiling. Junho complained playfully about his unlucky matchup. Hyul remained quiet, still thinking about Adela's performance earlier. Junho asked if Hyul had won his second duel. Hyul confirmed casually with a confident smile. Realizing the bracket's path, Junho trailed off. They both understood what the next round would mean. Adela approached them directly, calm and polite. She complimented Hyul on his recent match without hesitation. Junho scratched his head, flustered by the praise. Meanwhile, Hyul noticed something in Adela's focused expression. Hyul tilted his head slightly. Adela had addressed him directly with unexpected familiarity and seriousness. She referred to him by name, linking his return to a mage's original path, pure and focused. With a steady gaze, she revealed her reason for enrolling, to witness that path in action. Hyul spotted unfamiliar figures approaching the hallway, their purposeful steps hinting at something more than coincidence. Among them, a girl moved ahead confidently. Her presence radiated power, drawing everyone's attention without speaking. She had researched Hyul's sudden return to magic, intrigued by how he defied expectations and odds. Motivated by hidden reasons, she joined the academy seeking strength, answers, and someone capable of guiding her path. A family crest manifested behind her. She revealed her lineage, Hadosh, known for devastating fire magic and ancient secrets. Adela and Hyul once stood as equals, two top students destined to challenge each other constantly. Adela abandoned her prestigious education overseas, transferring to Obelisk Academy, only to surpass Hyul's growing reputation. But after Hyul was officially labeled as AI incompatible, everything between them came to a sudden halt. They never exchanged a single word again. The designation broke contact, purpose, and their competitive bond. And to Adela, his label ended the rivalry. To Hyul, it proved he was still incomplete. Adela turned sharply, declaring her challenge. She made it clear things would be settled through combat. As Hyul prepared backstage, a classmate questioned his focus. The duel's meaning hadn't sunk in yet. His friend grew frustrated, shouting that Hyul's opponent wasn't just anyone. It was Adela, the Academy's strongest. Adela stepped into the arena surrounded by magical energy. Her presence alone stirred awe and tension. Seeing her again, fully determined, Hyul froze. His mind raced. He hadn't expected this confrontation so soon. As dawn broke, the dueling arena filled with anticipation. The upcoming match drew spectators from across campus. The next day, students gathered early. They buzzed with excitement, waiting to see Adela and Hyul clash. Adela stood calmly inside the ring. Her silence reflected focus, but her eyes searched for her opponent. Spectators whispered doubts. Some mocked Hyul, wondering if fear made him flee from someone clearly outmatched. They scoffed at his claims of modified magic, dismissing it as baseless theory with no real strength. As the final seconds passed, the judge glanced at the clock. Shin Hyul was still missing. According to the Academy's duel regulations, with no opponent present, Adela Starrett would win by default. Suddenly, Hyul shouted from the corridor. Breathing hard, he ran toward the stage without hesitation or pause. He reached the platform, smiled confidently, and calmly said, "Sorry for being late." The judge, surprised and frustrated, yelled Hyul's name, demanding an explanation for his last-minute entrance. The judge confirmed the match. Adela warned Hyul that no recovery time would be granted today. She insisted it was his penalty for arriving late. Hyul silently nodded and took his position. Adela raised a question before the duel began, calmly asking why he arrived at the arena late. Hyul hesitated, then gave a vague answer with a slight grin. "Nothing major," he replied casually. Blue energy spiraled around him. "Just some preparations," he added, revealing power that stunned those watching nearby. The referee signaled the start. Adela stepped forward without hesitation, ready to test Hyul's so-called improvement. Hyul admitted she was strong. He explained that's why he took time to prepare for this battle. He smiled confidently, acknowledging this match wouldn't be easy, but it would definitely be worth the challenge. Adela observed his energy. She noticed something had changed. This wasn't the same Hyul from yesterday. She wondered silently, was this the moment she'd finally witness Hyul's full strength unleashed without holding back? Hyul steadied his stance, channeling magical energy into his hands as the arena crowd watched silently. The match officially began. Hyul warned that Adela would need to fight seriously from the first moment. A massive cheer erupted. Without hesitation, Adela responded to the challenge with aggressive magical force and precision. She activated one of her signature spells. Her eyes narrowed as she called out, "Flame Revolver!" Concentrated fire magic surged in her palm. Adela prepared to unleash it directly toward Hyul's position. Adela launched multiple flaming orbs across the arena. The blasts raced forward in synchronized, targeted formations. Hyul raised his arm, calling out his next spell without hesitation. He chose to counter directly. With one word, wind. He summoned a sweeping gust strong enough to challenge the incoming fireball's path. The flames exploded midair, redirected by Hyul's wind magic. The audience gasped at his precise control. Adela didn't stop. Slamming her fist down, she invoked another spell this time, with sharp, piercing impact. Adela's earth needle cracked the arena floor, releasing sharp energy spikes that surged directly toward Hyul's position. The ground split with force. A glowing line of magic chased forward, aiming to strike decisively. Reacting instantly, Hyul launched himself into the air, avoiding the direct hit by shifting his stance midair. Adela quickly calculated his trajectory. With him airborne, she believed he had no room to dodge again. Focusing her gaze, Adela moved to attack, convinced she could strike him before he landed safely. Adela cast arrow impact from above, closing in on Hyul's airborne position with crushing magical force. Hyul recognized the tactic, striking midair when mobility is lowest, a basic but effective aerial assault method. He admitted most would be unable to escape. Knowing it's coming doesn't guarantee avoiding the outcome. But Hyul wasn't like most. Calmly, he countered her spell with perfect timing, shouting out barrier. The magical shield activated midair, stunning the crowd. Their eyes widened, amazed by his unexpected defense strategy. Adela looked up, startled. She realized Hyul had done something unusual right in the middle of battle. Hyul flipped the barrier spell beneath his feet, converting it into a solid midair foothold instantly. He redirected his descent with perfect control. Adela recognized his magic style rare, precise, and incredibly adaptive. Hyul's unique magic sense hadn't faded. It was still sharp, and she'd need full strength now. To challenge his evolving power, Adela knew she must tap into every skill at her disposal. Hyul raised his hand high, declaring his resolve he would even harness sunlight itself to win. Hyul understood Adela's flame relied on moon-aligned elemental power. To counter it, he needed something stronger. He decided to respond with everything he had. No more holding back or reserve strategy today. Channeling his energy upward, Hyul summoned solar magic. He would draw power directly from the sun. As he invoked solar force, a shockwave knocked Adela back. She wasn't expecting this scale of power. Shielding her eyes, Adela stared upward, alarmed. She realized instantly Hyul was using the sunlight against her flames. As sunlight converged on Hyul's platform, Adela realized the threat and braced herself to defend immediately. With no time to counterattack, she knew she had to shield against the coming solar burst. The battle escalated. Adela cast a strong defense spell to repel Hyul's rapidly intensifying magical pressure. Meanwhile, Hyul invoked Arrow again, launching himself forward while directing focused currents to amplify his momentum. He sliced through the air, spiraling toward Adela. His movement created shockwaves that echoed across the arena. Hyul kept his focus sharp. He noticed Adela's defensive posture, using low-tier spells to test responses. She relied on Arrow, a basic barrier spell, confirming she planned to measure rather than rush. Hyul shifted positions mid-air, landing smoothly with magical energy pulsing around him, preparing for the next exchange. Adela saw her chance. Confident and alert, she raised her hand, ready to counter with force, but just as she prepared to strike, Hyul's sudden movement disrupted her plan and caught attention. The moment their eyes locked, tension rose. Hyul's calm intensity contrasted Adela's quickly growing concern. Before she reacted, she sensed magic from below. Hyul had cast Earthbind without chanting a word. She was shocked. He activated the spell the moment his foot touched the arena floor. Adela's thoughts raced. She struggled to follow his pace. His precision and reaction time were beyond expectation. Hyul was already repositioning again, moving faster than her vision could clearly track. The pressure mounted. Hyul rotated his stance and summoned another element. This time, it was a high-speed water spell. Calling out Water Missile, he shaped the liquid energy into sharp projectiles charged with intense magical force. Adela responded immediately, activating her flame magic. She braced to counter the incoming water-based assault. Hyul launched multiple missiles upward, using their arcs to restrict movement rather than attack directly. He repositioned fluidly while his spells rained down. The stage turned into a precise elemental chessboard. Adela reacted quickly, casting a barrier to shield herself as Hyul's water missiles rained from above. The wave of magic dispersed, crashing against her shield. She blocked the attack but felt pressured. Despite his improvement, Adela believed Hyul was still manageable. She felt confident holding her defensive position. A student outside the arena speculated that Hyul had used the fourth circle spell known as Memorize. Memorize allowed instant activation of lower-level spells, but only those within the third circle or below. Adela smirked, unconcerned. In her mind, a first circle spell wasn't enough to challenge her defenses. Suddenly, something shimmered in the sky. A faint magical trace began falling with quiet but sharp intent. The projectile struck fast in unexpected magical force. Adela couldn't locate the moment Hyul had cast it. Shocked, she questioned how he launched such an accurate hit without revealing any prior movement or buildup. Then it clicked. Hyul had modified a wind spear and hidden it among his previous spell pattern. Adela suddenly realized was the true setup hidden in the sunlight above her this entire time. Before she could fully react, she was hit, stumbling from Hyul's precisely timed counterattack. Hyul stepped forward calmly, magical energy still flowing. He reminded her not to underestimate who she faced. Looking down at her, Hyul warned again this duel wasn't over, and he wouldn't hold back. Adela pushed herself up, determined. Gritting her teeth, she whispered her own name as a declaration. From the viewing room, instructors noted Hyul's sharp instincts. His tactics were far beyond normal student capability. An observer explained everything began with Hyul evading Earth Needle. From that moment, his plan activated. He flipped the barrier for positioning, then launched downward, using sunlight to conceal his movement entirely. By controlling shadows and light, Hyul effectively blocked Adela's line of sight for several crucial seconds. In that window, he used Memorize to silently prepare a delayed wind spear for counterattack execution. An instructor explained how Hyul used Arrow mid-descent, intentionally pulling Adela's full attention toward himself. His movement suggested a setup for close combat, masking the true purpose behind his Earthbind. At the precise moment sunlight aligned behind him, he moved into position to execute the strike. With perfect timing, Hyul released the delayed wind spear, catching Adela off guard with silent precision. A calm observer in the audience smiled, remarking that Hyul moved like a true grand mage. One observer acknowledged Hyul's ingenuity, but dismissed it as limited at the core. Still basic magic. He gestured toward the arena, inviting others to observe what real difference higher circle spells could make. Despite Hyul's smart setup, both duelists remained standing. The battlefield bore no signs of decisive advantage. Adela and Hyul faced each other again. Neither showed fear, but tension quietly rose between them. From the audience, a voice noted Hyul's flaw. Even with perfect setup, he couldn't finish the match. A spectator analyzed the battle closely, realizing Hyul had reached his current limit with no finishing move. He concluded confidently Hyul couldn't end this match on his own, without higher-tier magic or disruption. Meanwhile, Hyul silently acknowledged that Adela still hadn't revealed her final and most dangerous magical technique. Adela calmly stepped forward, praising Hyul's performance. His efforts reminded her of a past formidable mage. Her tone sharpened. With glowing energy, she declared her intent to fight using her full strength. Hyul exhaled sharply. At last, the moment had come. Adela was unleashing her true strength. Magical energy surged around her. She entered a new state, channeling the full power within her bloodline. Hyul recognized the spell instantly. It was the ultimate form of moon-aligned magic, powerful and deeply ancient. Adela began casting the secret technique passed down in her family, the House of Mystics, hidden magic. Adela stood tall and confident, complimenting Hyul. His progress reminded her of a long-past rival. With firm resolve, she declared she would no longer hold back. She would fight at full strength. Hyul responded with equal determination, preparing his stance once more as his magical energy flared outward. A mysterious aura enveloped Adela again. Her signature magic surged upward, preparing to enter its final form. Hyul's expression hardened. He braced himself, knowing what was coming. Adela's overwhelming moon attribute spell was activating. Adela rose into the air, channeling her clan's most powerful technique, the ultimate mystic secret spell. The spell's name echoed through the arena, Halo. A legendary moon attribute magic passed through generations. Massive runes formed above her. Hyul moved cautiously, trying to read the spell's direction and purpose. Energy surged across the floor. The spell activated with explosive light, shaking the arena with overwhelming force. Instructors watched silently, tense. The magic unfolding now was rare, dangerous, and nearly impossible to counter directly. One official noticed another preparing to leave and asked if he was walking out already. Without hesitation, the man replied that the battle's outcome was already decided. There was nothing more to see. He calmly walked away, unconcerned, convinced the match had reached a point of no return. Another instructor gasped in shock, noticing something unusual happening just as the others were turning away. A smirking observer offered no explanation. He simply uttered, "That's?" while watching with quiet, knowing confidence. A spectator cried out in shock as the energy on the battlefield shifted rapidly and unexpectedly. Adela turned wide-eyed, struggling to understand what she was sensing. The magical signature felt completely unfamiliar. Hyul stood engulfed in blazing fire. Symbols rotated behind him as a powerful incantation took form. With a surge of force, he cast Flame Vulcan Raw, aggressive fire magic exploding from his core. Adela narrowed her eyes. It was only second circle magic, yet the output far exceeded normal expectations. Adela questioned the spell again. It looked basic, but released far more energy than expected from Hyul. Hyul laughed confidently, reminding her he had warned her his delay was preparation specifically to defeat her. Adela analyzed carefully. She remembered that Memorize could only preload and activate spells of the third circle. Her expression shifted. She asked directly, was it possible that Hyul had reached the fifth circle already? Hyul didn't deny it. His smile said enough. This was no longer a battle of equals. That night, at Obelisk Academy's dormitory, Hyul sat quietly, reflecting on the battle's unfolding events. He stared at the old spellbook, arms crossed, thinking deeply about the difference in their magical power. Hyul admitted to himself Adela couldn't be beaten with first circle spells alone, not in a real fight. He considered the book before him. His combat instincts weren't designed for deceptive, hidden techniques. Still, with a quiet sigh, he opened the tome again, committing to adapt and go further. Hyul studied the latest page in Idrid's tome, recognizing it contained something completely different and advanced. He read aloud, "Channel power into the next page's magic circle to unlock the path ahead." A glowing diagram emerged beneath his fingertips. The message promised it would lead to a new realm. Hyul stared at the pattern, wondering if it was a gate, trigger, or something even deeper. Without hesitation, he raised his hand and declared, "I will try, choosing to move forward boldly." Hyul placed his hand firmly on the page. Magic flared as energy pulsed from the book. Startled, he drew back slightly as the ancient symbol reacted instantly to his touch and aura. The glowing intensified. Hyul shielded his eyes and shouted it wasn't stopping, only getting stronger and brighter. Energy exploded upward, filling the room with light. Symbols swirled, drawing in every drop of mana. The book hovered mid-air, glowing and humming. Something within had been awakened, waiting only for Hyul's will. Hyul blinked as light overwhelmed him. His surroundings changed. An unfamiliar air filled his lungs. He opened his eyes inside a glowing room lined with bookshelves and golden magic flowing everywhere. Looking around in confusion, Hyul asked aloud where had he arrived, and what was this place? And then, in a voice answered from above, "Welcome to the page of the first trial." A floating figure introduced herself as Alpha, the guide assigned to oversee the first page's trial. Hyul repeated Alpha's words, confused. Was this really the beginning of the first trial's page? Alpha confirmed it clearly. This was the official first trial, fully contained within the Magic of Idred's book. Hyul was stunned. This space wasn't a distant world, but somehow existed inside the tome itself. He examined the surroundings, realizing this wasn't an illusion. It was a real place hidden in pages. Still processing the truth, Hyul whispered to himself in disbelief. Unbelievable. As the room shimmered around him. Alpha, the guide, prepares Hyul for the first trial meant to assess his mastery over Sime. This trial determines whether Hyul's understanding of the fundamental technique is complete or still lacking precision. If successful, new sections in the book will unlock, granting access to advanced second circle magic knowledge. Hyul understands the structure clearly. Passing this challenge is essential for advancing to the next magical threshold. The system is formalized. Alpha waits silently as the magical process prepares to initiate the first trial. Fully resolved, Hyul accepted the challenge. He understood this trial would determine his future magical capabilities. Alpha activated the trial protocol, summoning the surrounding energy that would shape the conditions of the challenge. As magic engulfed the room, Alpha announced the trial's beginning. Hyul stood ready for whatever came next. Hyul raised his arm with determination, declaring he was ready to accept the first difficult challenge. As shimmering lights whirled around him, Hyul took a deep breath, steadying his heart and mind. He closed his eyes, feeling the ancient power gathering, prepared to test his strength and spirit completely. Floating gently, the ethereal figure watched Hyul closely. Surprised, he was neither frightened nor hesitant now. Glowing brighter, the entity announced the trial's rules, determined to reveal Hyul's true hidden magical potential. Hyul stared upward, realizing this was the trial's true form that would test his entire resolve. A radiant gem materialized slowly, its swirling light signaling a power far beyond ordinary magical comprehension itself. The voice explained the gem's name was Elemental Manalite, an incredibly rare and powerful crystal. Hyul listened carefully, understanding his task was to purify this gem without making a single error. He clenched his hands tighter, preparing to manipulate mana precisely and complete the impossible purification alone. Hyul realized the gem contained 4 types of mana, swirling together in absolute chaotic disorder. He felt overwhelmed, comparing it to separating mixed grains perfectly without making any mistakes at all. Pacing slowly, Hyul knew only an expert archmage could complete such a precise and impossible task. But instead of fear, determination grew inside him, believing this trial would finally prove his worth. With steady eyes, Hyul reached for the gem, ready to start the delicate purification process immediately. Inside the gem, countless colors churned wildly, each representing a separate force that resisted his control. Hyul narrowed his eyes, watching the streams of mana twist together in dangerous, unpredictable, shifting patterns. He extended both hands, slowly channeling his own mana to steady the swirling energy around him. Sweat formed on his brow as he commanded himself to focus completely without any single distraction. Gradually, the violent colors began separating, and Hyul felt the gem respond to his precise effort. The gem's backlash exploded, throwing Hyul backward across the room with a force he barely contained. Breathing heavily, he realized the mana inside felt alive, shifting constantly to resist any separation attempts. Hyul studied the swirling gem carefully, understanding that brute force alone would never untangle such dense mana. Determined, he clenched his fist, confident he'd discovered a better way to divide the chaotic energy. With renewed resolve, Hyul charged again, willing to repeat this process until the gem was purified. Hyul struggled to steady his breath, knowing even one mistake would erase all his progress instantly. Again and again, he was forced to restart, each attempt demanding more focus than the last. At last, he shouted with relief, realizing he had fully purified the elemental mana light gem. A voice echoed, congratulating him for completing the trial and proving himself worthy of the ancient power. The light proclaimed Hyul a successor, ready to receive the second ring and continue the path. Hyul awoke on his bed, exhausted but alive, after enduring the gem's impossible purification trial. Blinking slowly, he sat up and whispered to himself, surprised he had returned home safely, and beside him, the ancient grimoire stirred, golden letters swirling across its pages like living flames. Smiling with relief, Hyul knew the book now revealed secrets he had earned through determination. With steady hands, he prepared to learn the method required to weave the powerful second ring. Hyul traced the glowing text, determined to master the second ring before the next challenge began. Far away, clouds drifted peacefully over the academy, unaware of the turmoil soon approaching their gates. Inside the grand arena, a powerful sorceress unleashed her magic, surrounding herself with shimmering protective barriers. Instantly, the floor cracked under the pressure of her spell, energy surging and splitting the stone apart violently. With unwavering focus, she prepared to counterattack, ready to prove her strength against any approaching threat. Energy pulsed around the arena as the sorceress tightened her spell, determined to end the fight. Clenching his fist, the spectator cursed under his breath, convinced Hyul would soon be completely defeated. With a confident smile, she lowered her hand, believing the match was already finished without doubt. Watching closely, she wondered how Hyul had advanced so far, hiding such power behind his calm. Hyul stood smiling on the stage, his presence hinting he still had more secrets to reveal. The sorceress lowered her arms slowly, sensing a strange vibration rippling through the entire glowing barrier. Her eyes widened in alarm as an eerie hum grew louder, echoing across the silent arena. A dark voice announced the second circle's resonance activation, signaling a power no one had expected. Hyul's gaze turned sharp and unyielding, his red eyes gleaming as energy gathered in both hands. Surrounded by blazing symbols, Hyul prepared to unleash dangerous magic, determined to end the fight decisively. Dark energy exploded outward, forming giant spectral hands that hovered over Hyul's circle of intricate runes. Standing firmly, Hyul extended his arms, channeling the power as his voice echoed with authority. His crimson eyes locked forward. He commanded the spell to bind itself with unbreakable will and purpose. Spectators gasped in shock, realizing they were witnessing forbidden magic no student was supposed to ever learn. Panic spread instantly as some screamed, unable to comprehend the overwhelming force surging through the arena. She stumbled backward, clutching her chest as fear surged, unsure what power Hyul had unleashed now. Before her, enormous spectral hands spread wide, pulsing with energy that threatened to crush everything nearby. Hyul's eyes glowed fiercely as he commanded the spell, summoning a raging flame that answered instantly. Realizing the danger, she shouted to activate her defense magic, hoping it would shield her in time. The entire arena shook as resonance I fully activated, pouring unstoppable force toward his trembling opponent. Her eyes widened in disbelief, realizing Hyul's unleashed force was far beyond anything she could counter now. Raising her staff, she tried desperately to block the attack, feeling her strength slipping away quickly. A calm smile crossed her lips as she accepted the truth of his return without any doubt. She whispered softly, asking him to once again become her rival and drive her ambitions forward. From the stands, a spectator gasped in shock, unable to comprehend the scene unfolding before everyone's eyes. Hyul stepped forward calmly, his presence radiating strength that silenced the entire arena in an instant. Spectators exchanged uneasy glances, realizing no one had ever witnessed magic this precise or overwhelming before today. His opponent charged again, refusing to surrender despite the clear difference in their power and experience. With a single motion, Hyul's force sent her crashing backward, shattering the tiles beneath her completely. Breathing heavily, Hyul dropped to one knee, exhausted but victorious after the most difficult duel yet. The announcer's voice trembled as he declared the match over, unable to hide his own disbelief. Cheers erupted across the arena while the victor's name echoed loudly. Shin Hyul had won decisively today. As the audience settled, Hyul turned quietly, preparing to leave before anyone could question his intentions. Someone called out, asking if he was departing already, curiosity mixing with respect in their steady voice. Without turning, Hyul replied he had other appointments, leaving only silence and wonder behind in his wake. And Hyul flashed a tired grin, knowing everyone could see he had no real appointments waiting. The crowded hall erupted in murmurs as students watched him with curiosity, respect, and a little fear. He exhaled deeply, wiping sweat from his brow, finally admitting to himself he was completely exhausted. His mind drifted, recalling how the second infinite circle could synchronize perfectly with Heart's intense circulation. By adjusting dark element output, he learned to combine moon attribute magic into a dangerous hybrid spell. Hyul realized he could narrow the attack's range, making each strike precise instead of widespread destruction. He combined dark magic enhancements with moon magic, countering Halo's defenses using a calculated layered assault method. Moon magic remained a closely guarded secret, passed only within the House of Moon's ancient lineage. Yet by studying its structure briefly, Hyul managed delicate mana manipulation that few dared attempt before. With sharp insight, he discerned moon magic's core and used it to fuel his resonance circle. Hyul walked calmly through the academy hall, feeling everyone's curious eyes fixed firmly on his back. From across the room, a man adjusted his glasses, watching Hyul with a thoughtful, serious expression. He stepped forward purposefully, his polished shoes echoing against the floor as the crowd moved aside respectfully. Stopping a few paces away, he raised his voice clearly so Hyul could hear him easily. Hyul turned slowly, surprised to see the man calling his name with such unexpected familiarity and warmth. A student shouted nervously, announcing the man's title as Master of the Mage Tower to everyone. Smiling confidently, the master declared he had come personally to speak directly with Hyul about everything. Hyul's heart pounded as he realized the Mage Tower's master had come to see him directly. With a calm smile, the master announced he had something very important to discuss with Hyul. Soon after, they sat together in a quiet room overlooking the academy's training grounds in silence. The master apologized politely for arriving without notice, then praised Hyul's impressive performance during the fierce duel. Hyul lowered his gaze respectfully and thanked the master for acknowledging his effort in that battle. The master adjusted his glasses carefully, preparing to ask Hyul a question no one dared voice. He spoke evenly, wanting the truth. Had Hyul already reached the level of the fifth circle? Hyul sat in silence, considering how much he should reveal about his strength and hidden skills. He remembered he'd only used second circle magic in battle, never showing his full potential openly. It was logical others believed he was stronger, since such techniques usually belong to higher-ranked mages. Hyul laughed awkwardly and admitted honestly that he hadn't yet reached the fifth circle of magic. The master nodded thoughtfully, then pressed further, asking how Hyul performed second circle spells without advanced rank. Hyul hesitated, wondering if saying he used vision magic would sound unbelievable to the master's ears. Curious, the master questioned if it was transformation magic, searching Hyul's expression for any hint of truth. He recalled Hyul mentioning transformation during earlier interviews, hoping this time he would finally share everything openly. Hyul agreed quickly, saying it was transformation magic, though he knew it wasn't the full truth. Inside, he decided this explanation was enough, since revealing everything would bring unnecessary attention and suspicion. He reminded himself that reaching fifth circle so young would spark headlines and chaos in the world. Sitting across from the master, Hyul resolved to keep his real abilities hidden for as long necessary. Trying to appear casual, Hyul admitted he had improved memory magic, avoiding the deeper explanation for now. The master's eyes widened with excitement as he repeated Hyul's words about improving memory-based magic techniques. Hyul nodded calmly, watching the older man pace thoughtfully, clearly impressed by the simplicity of his explanation. The master tapped his chin, acknowledging that modifying memorize was certainly an unusual but effective approach to magic. He leaned forward, smiling with genuine curiosity, wanting to understand exactly how Hyul refined such complex spells. Praising him, the master admitted he never imagined anyone could improve Memorize's weaknesses so thoroughly and easily. Hyul lifted his gaze cautiously, sensing something had shifted when the master locked eyes with him directly. Red light flickered in the master's pupils, mirroring Hyul's eyes with an intensity that felt unsettling. A sudden pressure filled the room as their eyes met, energy crackling between them without warning. Hyul straightened his back, refusing to look away even as the air seemed to vibrate dangerously. Silence fell, broken only by their racing heartbeats as they stared each other down without blinking. The master's expression softened as he finally reached a conclusion he seemed comfortable sharing with everyone present. He confirmed that Hyul showed no monolines or other signs typical of a fifth circle mage. Turning slightly, he acknowledged Hyul's earlier statement, admitting it was likely honest and free of deception. With a polite smile, the master announced he would stand up and address the gathered reporters personally. His eyes glimmered thoughtfully, ready to deliver an explanation that would settle all remaining suspicions immediately. Hyul exhaled slowly, bowing politely as he thanked the master for coming and offering his guidance. He turned away, shoulders heavy with relief as the door closed quietly behind the older man. Standing alone, Hyul wiped sweat from his brow, feeling the tension finally drain from his body. He reflected on how unexpected it was to face the master's piercing red jade's magic eyes. Those legendary eyes had seen through countless lies, leaving Hyul more cautious than ever about secrets. Legends claimed Kim Kangan's magic eyes could pierce any disguise, exposing the deepest currents of mana. Hyul sighed nervously, amazed he hadn't been caught hiding his true power from such a master. He reminded himself the Baitaneo-style magic was his greatest secret, never to be shared lightly. Outside, the arena echoed with cheers as the match officially ended under a bright, cloudless sky. An announcer's voice rang out, declaring Shin Hyul the winner, sealing his reputation in everyone's eyes. Hyul turned sharply, sensing someone approaching behind him as energy slowly settled around his tense shoulders again. A clear voice called for him to wait, halting his steps before he could leave quietly. He glanced back over his shoulder, surprised to recognize Adela standing there with a steady gaze. Adela remarked she expected him unconscious longer, impressed he'd recovered so quickly after such a fight. Hyul nodded once and asked calmly what was happening now, ready to hear her explanation directly. Adela looked thoughtful, explaining the finals were approaching but offering to wait if he needed rest. Hyul shook his head firmly, insisting they should handle everything now while memories were still clear. He added that feedback would help refine his skills, asking her to lead him to preparation. Walking behind him, Adela admired his determination, realizing how much she could still learn by observing. In her heart, she promised that someday she would stand confidently at his level as well. Sunlight glinted off the towering building, where the Mage Tower held its most important meetings and announcements. Inside the grand hall, dozens gathered, waiting anxiously to hear statements about the duel and results. A reporter stepped forward, microphone raised, calling Shin Hyul's name as he prepared to answer questions. The sun rose over the towering Shin Group headquarters, casting strong light across the mirrored windows. Inside, the grand emblem of the Shin Group pulsed with hidden power, vibrating through the silent halls. In the spacious chamber, tension hung heavy as important decisions waited to be made by everyone. Clenching his fist, Hyul cursed under his breath, anger burning at his inability to change anything. Smiling faintly, she stepped closer, voice low, confessing she believed everything had already been completely lost. Shin Se-ah clenched her fist tightly, anger building as she thought about the looming threat. Shin Jahan watched her carefully, voice calm, trying to keep the situation from becoming completely unmanageable again. He asked quietly what options remained if Hyul returned, bringing chaos and questions back to everyone. Se-ah turned sharply, reminding Jahan of everything that happened when Hyul left the family years ago. Jihan lifted his hand confidently, assuring Se-ah they could survive whatever might come at them. Jihan pointed to the screen, reminding Se-ah that Hyul's skills had sharply declined over time. He called Hyul trash, able to use only second circle magic during any serious combat match. Jihan smirked and asked if she had seen those weak matches with her own eyes. Se-ah protested, insisting everyone admired Hyul's talent, even if he struggled with higher-level spells and techniques. Jihan turned serious, explaining every opponent Hyul faced so far was merely a three-circle student fighter. Jihan explained Hyul's fatal flaw, his complete incompatibility with AI magic, limiting his real strength. Sipping his drink, Jihan said Hyul survived only by using dangerous tricks and forbidden magical techniques. He insisted Hyul remained below the level of a proper magician, no matter how hard he trained. Se-ah listened quietly, her anger hidden, as Jihan claimed Hyul would always crawl beneath them. Jihan's eyes narrowed coldly, warning if Hyul threatened their plans they would remove him without hesitation. Jihan assured himself they could stop Hyul later, smashing his cup on the ground in frustration. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the stadium, where tension silently continued to build. A soft breeze moved through the arena as the day's final match neared its start. Two fighters faced each other in the cracked arena, neither willing to step back anymore, and a single boot struck the ground with force, marking the beginning of a decisive confrontation. The referee raised his arm high, preparing to announce the final result of the intense competition. His voice echoed through the arena, declaring Shin Hyul as the champion of the second-year midterms. The crowd erupted in cheers, everyone standing to celebrate the unexpected return of the hidden prodigy. Voices mixed together, praising Hyul's mastery of forbidden magic and his unmatched talent in every duel. Hyul lifted his head proudly, feeling strength and purpose returning after years spent in quiet isolation. Sun Chan ran forward, shouting Hyul's name proudly, unable to hide how impressed he truly felt. He wrapped Hyul in a tight hug, yelling that everyone finally recognized his strength and skill today. Nearby students whispered quietly, some dismissing Hyul's victory as nothing more than tricks and forbidden spells. A teacher approached, congratulating Hyul with a smile, saying he felt proud to be his instructor. Hyul laughed as Sun Chan cheered, agreeing to celebrate together after such an exhausting and important day. Hyul smiled apologetically, explaining he wanted to join but had something important he must handle first. Sun Chan groaned loudly, throwing his arms out, begging Hyul not to skip their celebration together. Hyul laughed and insisted he truly could not stay, no matter how much they all pleaded. The crowd watched him leave while Sun Chan sighed, realizing nothing would change Hyul's serious determination anymore. As the sun set, Hyul ran toward the city, remembering the promise he needed to honor. A man in a dark suit turned sharply, surprised to see Hyul approaching so confidently alone. He stepped forward, announcing they had been expecting Hyul, and gestured calmly toward the waiting car. Then, Hyul met his gaze without fear, knowing he was finally ready to face his family. The man explained the head of the family wanted him back, insisting it could not wait. Night settled over the vast estate as Hyul prepared himself to enter the main residence again, and Hyul stood beneath the moonlight, staring up at the familiar mansion he once called home. His eyes narrowed, memories flooding back as he realized how much had changed during his absence. He remembered the moment everyone learned he was incompatible with AI magic, losing all their respect. After defying his father, he left everything behind, moving into the academy dorms without any regrets. And now, after a year apart, he stepped through the doors determined to prove himself again. Hyul walked through the quiet hall, noticing how nothing inside the mansion had changed at all. He sighed softly, feeling it was exactly as he remembered before everything fell completely apart. His footsteps echoed over the cold floor, each step bringing him closer to the final confrontation. Stopping, he looked up at the door, Recognizing it immediately as his father's private study, Hyul's eyes narrowed with determination, knowing he could not turn back from this moment anymore. Hyul raised his hand and knocked firmly on the door, feeling his heartbeat start to quicken. Inside, his father sat alone at the grand desk, staring out at the moonlit night sky. Their eyes met briefly, and his father spoke in a cold voice, telling him to enter. Hyul pushed the heavy door open, stepping inside the study he had avoided for an entire year. Hyul stood beneath the glowing moon, feeling the weight of returning to this place again tonight. He stared at the tall doors, thinking he had finally made it back to this house. Inside, his father calmly turned a page, then spoke without looking up, telling him to enter. Hyul stepped forward, bowing slightly, and quietly said it had been a long time since before, and raising his eyes, Hyul met his father's cold stare, determined not to show any fear. Hyul's father gestured firmly, telling him to sit down as tension filled the silent study room. The room fell quiet, heavy with expectation, as the father prepared to speak his mind clearly. He admitted he once saw Hyul as a failure, incapable of mastering proper spells or magic. Hyul stood tall, listening as his father called him a simple, weak example of wasted potential. But the father added that despite everything, Hyul's unusual growth revealed an undeniable, exceptional talent. Hyul stayed silent while his father spoke, admitting he never expected much from this sudden return anyway. He explained he believed Hyul's actions were only a desperate attempt by someone completely cornered before. Hyul answered calmly, saying he understood his father's thoughts without showing any sign of anger now. His father revealed he read the recent article, thinking it might create an important chance for discussion. Turning back to face Hyul, he added there was still something serious needing to be addressed. Shattered fragments of cerulean magic floated around Hyul's hand as he calmly canceled the transformation spell. His father watched closely, commenting on the skill and precision Hyul demonstrated with every single movement made. He admitted that Hyul's current performance finally reached the level worthy of being called true magic. Hyul's eyes widened, surprised to hear any acknowledgement after so many years of silence and doubt. Taking a steady breath, he bowed his head slightly and spoke clearly, simply saying, "Thank you, father." His father spoke firmly, promising that the family would provide full support for Hyul's future endeavors now. He instructed Hyul to share everything required for magic research and return proudly to their house. Raising his voice, he declared Hyul would be recognized as the rightful successor of their family. Hyul listened without fear, feeling a quiet pride growing as he prepared to accept this challenge. Extending a sealed envelope, his father added there was still one more important matter to address. His father warned coldly that if he sensed any weakness, he would end Hyul's progress himself. He continued, saying that any sign of stagnation or regression would not be tolerated for long. Gripping Hyul's shoulder, he threatened to personally destroy every magical circle Hyul had worked so hard for. Hyul swallowed hard, admitting to himself he was afraid but knew this was his final chance. Standing straight, he replied firmly, ready to declare his purpose as his father demanded his goal. His father asked if Hyul still intended to become the head of the Shin family someday. Images of his siblings, Jihan, Sei'a, and Minju, flashed through his mind as he remembered every rivalry. His father declared Hyul was now stronger than any of them, surpassing their expectations entirely. Hyul stated firmly his only goal was to lead the family, nothing less would ever satisfy him. When asked how, he placed documents on the desk, declaring he would prove himself through competition. Hyul explained that competitors worldwide would gather to test their skills in this prestigious magical event. He declared confidently he would win the gold medal and prove his worth to the family. The arena, called the Magus Olympics, had hosted countless prodigies and legendary battles over many decades. This grand stage was respected everywhere, matching the difficulty of professional adult tournaments without any exceptions. His father reminded him their best result was a silver medal earned by the Blue Tower Lord. His father asked sharply if Hyul realized how unrealistic and reckless this bold declaration actually sounded now. Hyul nodded calmly, explaining that was why he needed to set a single important condition first. When pressed, he clarified his condition without hesitation, determined not to let doubt shake his resolve. He requested that during the 2 months before the tournament, the family not interfere with him. His father thought Hyul was foolish, using a promise he might fail to gain protective freedom. Morning sunlight poured over the academy building where Hyul had quietly returned after the tense family meeting. Books lay scattered across his small room, evidence of countless hours spent studying forbidden magic alone. Hyul slowly opened his tired eyes, realizing he had fallen asleep while reading another thick tome. Rubbing his forehead, he muttered to himself, wondering how long he had been unconscious there. He remembered that right after coming back from the estate, he had started researching without resting. Hyul studied the old tome carefully, knowing he must clear the second test to advance further. At that moment, he felt completely stuck, unable to understand how to reach the third circle. His only clue described resonance, something requiring the mastery stage of the second circle to achieve properly. He realized he needed to touch deep magic to approach that precise level of consonance required. Turning the page, he read he must find both the Ring of Judgment and Resonance first. Hyul raised his hand, releasing power as a bright shape of energy formed in the air. He stared at the glowing pattern, wondering if he had finally discovered the secret he needed. The mark hovered over the page, flickering softly as his heart beat faster with anticipation rising. Breathing out, he decided to take a break and clear his mind before trying it again. Outside, the bright city skyline stretched out under the blue sky, waiting for his next step. Hyul walked along the riverside path, telling himself he needed fresh air to clear his mind. He breathed deeply, enjoying the cool breeze and thinking he could finally reflect on resonance properly. While planning his study, he suddenly noticed something unusual in the distance that caught his full attention. Turning sharply, Hyul squinted ahead, trying to understand what was happening near the crowded street corner. He turned his head sharply, detecting an unusual surge of magical energy forming near his exposed neck. His eyes widened as a shimmering force expanded rapidly, confirming the presence of a concealed attacker nearby. The wave collided with his back, hurling his body forward across the crowded pavement with great force. Struggling to rise, he felt pain spreading through his shoulder. Realizing the spell had weakened his barrier, he lifted his hand, studying the faint blue glow that marked him as the mage's chosen target. A young woman appeared suddenly, pointing at him with urgency while the sky shimmered above them. He recognized her name, Apella, a figure mentioned in old records about forbidden magical experiments. Together, they started walking across the bridge, discussing the strange energy that had struck him earlier. She explained her artifact was unstable, released excess power, and then vanished into the surrounding atmosphere quickly. He apologized while offering her damaged belongings, promising to help recover the artifact before it spread further. They walked beneath the bright sky, both silent while the city continued moving calmly around them. She finally spoke, mentioning she had heard rumors about him returning home after a long absence. He nodded and explained he had returned to the Magic Tower just the previous day. She looked relieved, asking if he still planned to pursue leadership at the Magic Tower someday. He paused, surprised by her question, remembering the ambition he had hidden for many difficult years. He remembered childhood days, sitting with her on a bench, dreaming about the Magic Tower's future. He shook his head, stating firmly that becoming the Magic Tower's head was no longer his dream. Surprised, she assumed he had abandoned the dream, thinking reality's challenges had forced his decision. He smiled and corrected her, hinting his ambitions were greater than becoming the Magic Tower's leader. Confidently, he revealed his true goal, to surpass all and become the master of magic itself. He declared his ambition confidently, stating he would one day surpass all existing magic towers completely. She stood frozen, shocked by his words, struggling to understand the scope of his new vision. He proclaimed that reaching the highest level, becoming the pinnacle of all mages, was his goal. She exhaled, admitting that supporting someone with such determination and scale was truly an overwhelming experience. As night approached, they both stared silently at the sky, contemplating the path he had chosen. Night fell quietly over the Magic Tower residence, where important decisions shaped the fate of many. Inside the grand building, tension grew as anxious voices echoed through the halls and dark chambers. A young woman trembled with frustration, her fists clenched tightly while her breath came out unsteady. She shouted at her brother, demanding to know why he remained so calm and indifferent now. He answered steadily, insisting their father surely had reasons for his actions and would explain everything. He watched in silence, unable to understand why their father had created such impossible conditions now. Together, they entered the vast chamber, approaching the elder seated beneath towering windows filled with cold light. They demanded answers, asking directly why their father had summoned them so urgently without any notice. The father spoke calmly, announcing he knew their intentions and issued a strict command without further discussion. They were ordered to leave Hyul alone for 2 months, shocking her enough to scream loudly. She demanded an explanation, her voice trembling as she struggled to understand their father's sudden command. Their father looked calm, reminding them that Hyul had only just returned to the Magic Tower yesterday. He explained Hyul had spent a year away separated from family, training alone without any support. He decided Hyul deserved 2 months to adjust again before facing any interference or scrutiny from relatives. He accused them of planning to watch Hyul closely, fearing competition for leadership of the tower. Their father remained firm, his expression unchanging as he waited for them to accept his decision. The brother finally agreed, replying that he understood, and asked politely if any other orders remained unspoken. Their father turned away, instructing them to leave and rest since the meeting was now fully concluded. He stood alone by the window, watching the silent night while thinking over his chosen instructions carefully. The siblings walked out together, each carrying a heavy uncertainty about Hyul's return to their family. She frowned deeply, her thoughts unsettled by the order to leave Hyul unchallenged. For months her brother clenched his jaw, silently admitting he could not accept their father's decision without strong objections. He reasoned that since other siblings had no interest in leadership, they were excluded from the meeting. But he still felt uneasy, questioning why Hyul deserved special treatment after simply disappearing for a year. He suspected their father's protection had another purpose, and would only remain in effect temporarily for Hyul. He gripped the table, furious that their father's reasons remained hidden behind carefully chosen vague statements. His sister trembled, suspecting their father's health was failing, which might explain the sudden protective command. He dismissed her theory, insisting Hyul had not proven anything significant enough to earn such trust. Instead, he wondered if their father sensed hidden promise in Hyul's rapid return and new confidence. Or perhaps their father wanted to understand the strange magic system Hyul had secretly learned and mastered. She gasped and demanded to know what kind of deal their father might have arranged secretly. Frustration overwhelmed her, screaming that such orders were unlike their father and clearly favored Shin Hyul unfairly. He wondered if he should call back all the agents he had assigned to watch Hyul. He considered that their father felt confident Hyul wouldn't be exposed or caught by the hidden shadows. The shadows, their father's elite intelligence corps, could infiltrate anything and uncover every secret without leaving evidence. She looked at him seriously, demanding to know exactly what he planned to do about Hyul. He replied calmly that he was leaving, unwilling to simply wait 2 months without any action. He decided consulting the Black Tower was necessary. Suspecting Hyul had made a dangerous agreement with father, Orlick Academy stood grand, welcoming students back for another term filled with magic, ranks, and challenges. The professor announced the end of rankings, his eyes scanning papers for the name at the top. Shinshin Hyul, silent and composed, rose as the class erupted in applause, heads turning in surprise. The professor praised Shinshin Hyul's unmatched results, reminding everyone no other student had come close to his scores. Smiling subtly, Shin Hyul listened as the professor urged him to represent the class in the Academy Olympiad. Standing tall, Shin Hyul accepted the challenge without hesitation, determined to prove himself beyond basic expectations. Whispers rose as classmates mocked him quietly, doubting his success stemmed from more than beginner-level spells. They scoffed, claiming 2 months would reveal his flaws, believing his victory was just a fluke. Confident in their judgment, they labeled him a misfit unworthy of sustained recognition or higher praise. But Shin Hyul's eyes gleamed with resolve, undeterred, silently vowing to silence every doubt through undeniable results. Class ended and Ronin burst out dramatically, drained by hours of dense lectures and complex theory. He complained loudly, questioning the torment of 8 straight lessons packed with nothing but magical concepts. Shin Hyul remained calm, relieved tomorrow focused only on practical training instead of endless textbook discussions. Ronin tried to argue but collapsed dramatically. Shin Hyul blocked him, teasing his poor stamina with amusement. Exhausted and embarrassed, Ronin stared up with teary eyes, questioning if magic alone could save him. Ronin chased Shin Hyul in frustration, pretending to retaliate but barely keeping pace after the long day. Shin Hyul teased again, casually suggesting physical training as a solution to Ronin's constant magical and physical shortcomings. Ronin exploded, vowing revenge and swearing to train just to hit Shin Hyul at least once. Unbothered, Shin Hyul proposed a post-dinner session in the training room, smirking as the sun began to set. Flustered, Ronin hesitated, his pride bruised and body aching, too sore to accept another challenge that day. Shin Hyul crossed his arms, unimpressed, daring Ronin to admit he simply didn't want to train. Ronin snapped back, insisting it wasn't exercise he hated, just the idea of doing it with Shin Hyul. Confused, Shin Hyul asked what made training with him so unbearable, genuinely curious about Ronin's sudden resistance. With a rare seriousness, Ronin admitted it. He feared the way others stared whenever Shin Hyul moved. Inside the training room, Shin Hyul lifted impossible weight effortlessly while Ronin struggled, attracting attention just by association. Shin Hyul urged Junik to take training seriously, pointing out strength mattered just as much as magic. Spectators gathered in awe, whispering about the boy lifting impossible weight without magical support or assistance. Shin Hyul's grip tightened as the barbell slammed down, raw power earned through grit, not enchantments. He stepped away calmly, realizing how much he'd ignored his body while mastering complex runecraft. Remembering ancient wisdom, Shin Hyul admitted the truth: neglecting strength was warned even in the foundational magic scriptures. The book revealed a truth: the infinity circle's flow aligned closely with muscle development and endurance. Physical training amplified the circle's reach, strengthening not just the body but magical control and flow. Realizing this, Shin Hyul committed to mastering both disciplines, building harmony between spellcraft and personal strength. With renewed purpose, he trained relentlessly, each lift reinforcing balance between arcane power and physical resilience. Yet, far beyond the academy's walls, a sinister force stirred its gaze fixed on him. Suddenly, Shin Hyul stood surrounded. Mystic beasts circled him, their growls sharp, eyes glowing with hostile intent. The panthers lunged forward, swift and relentless, their claws slicing the air with unnatural, eerie precision. Shin Hyul dodged quickly, instincts and training converging as he narrowly avoided a lethal frontal strike. Electric energy surged through his gaze, focused, calm. Calculating, he prepared to unleash strength he'd honed with discipline. With blinding speed, he countered, slicing between enemies mid-leap, his movements precise and enhanced by awakened synergy. The panthers dashed again faster, sharper flickering with dark energy as they closed in from both sides. Shin Hyul leapt backward, narrowly dodging claws grazed air where his chest had been seconds before. He summoned flame, focused it into his palm. The fireball pulsed with raw, compressed magical energy. Flame Vulcan erupted outward, engulfing attackers with controlled destruction, pushing back the monsters in blazing arcs. Silence followed. From above, the system confirmed Shin Hyul had cleared the monster rush simulation flawlessly. The instructor announced results with a grin. Everyone awaited the outcome of Shin Hyul monster rush performance. A perfect clear, full marks. Shin Hyul smiled with quiet pride as applause filled the training hall. While others whispered in awe, Shin Hyul remained seated, calmly reviewing the after-effects within his own body. He confirmed it. His physical capabilities had surged, boosted by the Infinity Circle's unseen internal amplification. Driven by insight, Shin Hyul resolved to evolve further, unlocking the third circle to reach peak synergy. Shin Hyul inhaled slowly, channeling energy inward, ready to refine the Infinity Circle through deeper concentration. Mana flared brightly as he sat still, circulating both rings steadily through every limb and core. He fine-tuned the Ring of Resistance and Ring of Will, syncing their movement and rotation speed. With precision, he aligned mana paths at near-perfect levels, each adjustment strengthening control over his internal flow. Though sweat formed, he pushed further, determined to overcome the stubborn final 1% of synchronization difficulty. Shin Hyul stared at the screen. Circle master level loomed high, but his determination only grew stronger. He stepped out with purpose, every footfall a silent vow to break his limits through effort. Breathing steady, he picked up pace, muscles burning, rhythm tight, pushing farther than the day before. The academy's buildings blurred past him, but his focus stayed locked on unseen goals ahead. From the shadows, a hooded figure observed quietly, intent unknown, but presence cloaked in silent threat. Shin Hyul's senses flared. He spun instantly as a sudden strike whooshed past, barely missing his head. A cloaked figure lunged again, blade slicing the air. Shin Hyul blocked, feet bracing against the assault. He stepped back quickly, eyes sharp. His voice rang out, demanding the attacker reveal themselves. Recognition struck those eyes, that stance. Shin Hyul's expression tightened as he confirmed the identity without doubt. The hood fell slightly, white hair flashed. The attacker was Baek Sayuk, an old rival Reborn. A masked attacker lunged from the shadows, blade slicing air, aiming straight for Shin Hyul's exposed ribs. Shin Hyul twisted back just in time, dodging narrowly, eyes locking on the assassin's sudden silent retreat. His heart raced. The crimson glow in his eye flared. Recognition struck as memories long buried surfaced. The figure's silver hair slipped from his hood. Shin Hyul mind screamed the name Baek Sunhak, betrayer. Brother. Without hesitation, Shin Hyul drew his blade, charging forward. Vengeance burned. Their unfinished past demanded brutal resolution now. Baek Sunhak growled and swung with fury. His pride cracked as blood dripped from his clenched jaw. Shin Hyul dropped low, catching his breath. The counterattack stung, but his eyes never lost their calculating calm. He smirked, brushing blood from his lip, thinking of old rivalries, unspoken truths, and their shattered past. Sunhak cursed from above. Shin Hyul circled carefully, watching how the elder brother's anger exposed his flawed stance. Laughter escaped Shin Hyul's chest, mocking, honest, cruel. Vengeance burned less than truth. Sunhak's downfall was always self-inflicted. Their magic clashed mid-air, icy blue and burning red. Power surged wildly, drawing startled gazes from onlookers nearby. Sunhak's fury ignited. Flames erupted from his fist, scorching the air as he roared in blind rage. Shin Hyul froze, sensing the shift. The crowd whispered, unsettled. His opponent had crossed an irreversible, reckless line. Enforcers murmured from the shadows. Unauthorized magic sparked alarm. Shin Hyul braced himself. Sunhak's downfall would now be public. Red eyes narrowed. Shin Hyul stepped forward, his focus sharpened. The fight was no longer personal, it was judgment. Shin Hyul parried the flaming strike, stepped in close, and drove his elbow into Sunhak's exposed ribs. Shock spread across Sun Hak's face. He had underestimated his brother Shin Hyul's speed now outmatched his burning rage. Sun Hak hit the ground hard. Shin Hyul stood firm, silent, his presence towering with calm and buried pain. As Sun Hak screamed, Shin Hyul's eyes held no joy. Victory meant nothing. This was survival, not revenge. Overhead, sirens blared. Agents arrived below. Shin Hyul looked upward. This was over, but everything else was just beginning. Sun Hak thrashed in fury, restrained by officials. His pride wounded deeper than his body, he screamed threats. The lead officer urged calm, dragging him aside. There was protocol even for traitors of noble blood. Shin Hyul stood nearby, unshaken. His report was brief. Emotionless. Sun Hak had attacked first. Magic had crossed the line. Surveillance footage confirmed the truth. The city's laws were absolute. Reckless power had no shield anymore. Shin Hyul watched as order returned. He exhaled slowly. Tomorrow, questions would begin. Tonight, he walked alone, undefeated. Shin Hyul whispered the name, crimson eyes glowing. He wouldn't forget, not the fight, nor the pain. Above, the stars offered silence. His thoughts echoed louder. Purpose remained, but peace would never come easy. Morning sunlight warmed the academy rooftop. Another day began, but the scars of last night lingered. Inside, students gossiped and whispered. The name Baek Sunhyuk now meant disgrace, not power or legacy. The bulletin sealed it, formal punishment, reputation shattered, his downfall displayed like warning ink on school walls. Whispers of favoritism grew louder. 10 demerits for public magic use. It reeked of something hidden. Shin Hyul narrowed his eyes. The truth was clear. Power wasn't just magic. It wore tailored suits, too. The Baek family had bought silence. Prestige flowed with money, and Sunhyuk's punishment had a price tag. Shin Hyul walked the corridor, quiet but resolute. Justice here bent often, yet he would never bow. Behind him, the voice returned, loud, angry, unrepentant. Sunhyuk hadn't learned, and Shin Hyul, he was ready again. Sunhyuk stood alone, phone trembling in hand. His apology echoed uselessly against polished pillars and silence. His father's voice boomed, ruthless and cold. Sunhyuk flinched. He wasn't a son, just a tool for legacy. The mansion walls stood tall, but he felt small. Shame coiled tighter than any magic binding. He ended the call, chest heavy. Apologies didn't matter. Only success and failure wrote names in the Baek ledger. Anger blurred his vision. Regret burned worse. Sunhyuk's war wasn't with Shin Hyul, it was with his bloodline. The doors slammed open. Rage surged through Sunhyuk as he stormed out, heart pounding louder than footsteps. His blade glinted mid-swing, cleaving air. Phantom enemy, real fury. Shin Hyul name echoed like a curse. Memories blurred. His eye twitched, jaw clenched. Shin Hyul, Shin Hyul, Shin Hyul. That name strangled every thought in him. Sunhyuk sprinted, blinded by hate. The sun burned, but not as fiercely as his spiraling emotions. He ran harder. The world tilted. His rage needed a target, and Shin Hyul was everything wrong. Instructor Smith's words cut sharper than any spell. Sunhyuk's rage hadn't gone unnoticed by those in power. His name startled Sunhyuk. He straightened, masking the rawness. Authorities' attention could either crush or elevate him. Sunhyuk barked defensively, but it rang hollow. The fire inside him needed direction. Smith sensed it clearly. The instructor smiled, stepping closer. Power laced his voice. Revenge, he said. That's something you can control. Sunhyuk's scowl twisted slowly into a grin. For once, someone wasn't silencing him, they were handing him a weapon. Smith's words echoed through shadows. Temptation whispered like smoke, poisonous and seductive. Revenge always cost more than pain. The academy remained still. But behind those windows, rivalries, secrets, and quiet deals reshaped the battlefield. Shin Hyul reclined calmly, thoughts sharp. The chaos brought opportunities, not just survival, but leverage in a silent war. A message arrived. One glance confirmed it: his family now owned a stake in the Baek fortune. Deals had been struck, not with spells or swords, but silence. Shin Hyul won battles others never saw. Shin Hyul read the message silently. Rewards meant little. He'd already taken what truly mattered: status, influence, control. The night city pulsed below. Deals had reshaped empires. Baek's fall was no accident, but design. Shin Hyul stood alone with his crest burning behind him. The world now knew his bloodline's strength. In silence, he grasped what titles meant. Not honor, but leverage. Power wrapped in ceremonial approval. Sunhyuk was cast out unspoken, yet clear. He'd lost more than pride. He'd lost his place forever. With conflict fading, Shin Hyul returned to study. Power mattered, but so did growth, knowledge, and quiet preparation. The academy basked in calm skies. Beneath it, ambition simmered. Students moved forward, none unchanged. Shin Hyul stared upward, thoughtful. Reputation had shifted. Even cultivation discussions now revolved around his name and deeds. The voice called from behind. Familiar, controlled. Shin Hyul turned slowly, his smirk polite, but instincts alert. Instructor Smith approached, smiling. The stage hadn't cleared, it was only resetting. Another game was beginning. Smith's tone softened, but his eyes didn't. His words came measured, laced with deliberate ambiguity. Shin Hyul stood firm, expression unreadable. He understood games now, especially those played with smiles, not spells. Smith confessed to past offenses, masking threats as advice. Experience had taught him diplomacy was leverage. Shin Hyul didn't flinch. Respect wasn't owed. Power wasn't trusted. Words alone couldn't sway someone forged by fire. Still he nodded. Let the instructor speak. Shin Hyul would listen, then decide whether to strike or wait. Smith extended his hand with a smile. Let's start over, he said, voice smooth as silk. Shin Hyul responded with a nod. But something shifted. A ripple of darkness prickled beneath his skin. His eyes widened, magic flared unnaturally. Something was wrong. The air itself recoiled from the surging foreign energy. Smith stood cloaked in purple mana, voice like thunder. I sincerely hope you found your own path. Shin Hyul instinct screamed. This wasn't renewal, it was warning. Whatever Smith was hiding, it wasn't human anymore. Civilians moved through the plaza unaware. Peace masked the pressure quietly rising beneath the surface of reality. An arcane explosion tore through the sky. Raw magic burst loose, warping space and warping nearby technology. An old mage lifted his gaze. His eyes glowed crimson, recognizing the magic signature from his past. A fortress cloaked in purple mist emerged. Its shields flickered, unable to fully suppress the awakening surge. Several high-ranking agents assembled quickly. They activated defensive barriers, preparing for whoever or whatever had just returned again. The young mage gritted his teeth. Energy readings had spiked beyond protocol thresholds. Something felt deeply wrong. Instructor Smith levitated midair, trapped by threads of runes. His body twitched, suspended inside a mana cage. Memories clicked into place. The tower's core had begun leaking energy weeks ago. Ignored warnings now made sense. Panic surged, but he refocused. There was no time to argue over past decisions or blame. He activated his interface, scanning the arcane output. Every metric screamed collapse, yet the structure held firm. His eye flared red, analyzing the flow. The structure of the magic confirmed his suspicion instantly. It was a rare, prohibited technique. The signature clearly pointed to an advanced-level mind control spell construct. Fortunately, his mental defenses had been enhanced. Neural patterns blocked the invasive signals, preserving conscious control completely. Instructor Smith stood still, puppet-like. The student realized the control spell had failed to override his thoughts. He scanned the plaza. No one noticed the manipulation yet. He needed to act before exposure. He narrowed his gaze slightly, lowering suspicion. Internal commands rerouted to focus on memory trace capture. Pretending to obey, he positioned himself for contact. His real goal: extract tower data without alerting anyone. A forced chuckle masked suspicion. They walked slowly as mana threads began probing for hidden memory locks. The old man scoffed, unaware. His pride blocked reason. He believed control was intact despite clear resistance. He leaned closer to whisper, tone lowered, words heavy. Something critical was about to be revealed directly. The old man pressed a sealed cube into Shin Hyul's hand. Purple energy seeped from its surface. Shin Hyul nodded calmly, concealing discomfort. The item pulsed lightly, syncing faintly with his suppressed core signature. Suddenly, pressure thickened around them. The elder's tone shifted. He demanded information about Shin Hyul's forbidden mutation technique. A surge clashed in Shin Hyul's mind. He staggered, instantly unable to resist the probe targeting suppressed memories. The elder observed coldly. Shin Hyul's reaction confirmed suspicion. Something deeply dangerous was locked inside his magical genome. Shin Hyul gasped for air, sweat dripping. Internal pressure built fast. Something was digging deeper than before. The elder's hand glowed with dark symbols. Threads of mana latched onto Shin Hyul's spine, extending upward. Mind control magic targeted core cognition. Visual data streamed inward, triggering subconscious memory leaks and involuntary reactions. Known as forbidden black magic, it bypassed ethical constraints and rewired neural safeguards to isolate truth. Shin Hyul resisted violently, but the instructor already sensed fear. He knew this meant the truth was hidden. The elder clenched his teeth, barely suppressing frustration. Shin Hyul's resistance had stalled the full extraction process. Wiping his face, the man composed himself. He dismissed Shin Hyul's power as unworthy of his rank. Still, Shin Hyul's vision magic was useful. The elder decided to claim it, but only after mission completion. Shin Hyul swayed slightly. A sharp pulse ran through him, followed by a flicker in his vision. Feigning concern, the instructor backed off. His tone lightened, hiding the threat beneath a smile of farewell. Shin Hyul replied quietly, masking strain. His legs moved automatically, though his focus lagged behind the conversation. The instructor walked ahead, disappearing into the crowd. Shin Hyul remained still, watching him blend into others. A shadow crossed Shin Hayul's face. He breathed slowly, calming his scattered thoughts and scanning his surroundings. Students chatted around him, unaware of what had occurred. Their world remained blissfully untouched for now. He joined the crowd in silence. Internally, the mission began one he couldn't afford to fail. The courtyard buzzed with life. Shin Hayul moved away from crowds, choosing a quiet bench under shade. He sat down, clutching the cube. Thoughts churned as he examined the object more closely now. Bringing it near his eye, he activated analysis. A strange marking pulsed from the internal circuitry. His vision confirmed the truth. It was an illegal AI invocation chip, banned under strict regulatory codes. Realization hit hard. Giving this to him meant only one thing: someone wanted to frame him. A media leak spread fast. News outlets accused Shin Hayul of misusing illegal magic devices for advancement. He reviewed the headlines, noting exact phrases. The framing was methodical, clearly staged to damage him. Shin Hayul weighed his options. Though Smith was involved, even he lacked reason to act alone. This wasn't just academic sabotage, it was strategic removal before the Black Tower's internal power realignment. He identified 4 rivals. Each had motive. One wanted his magic, another his position at stake. He ruled out his sister Malin. Though strong, she had no stake in the current succession. Likewise, his older brother lacked initiative. A loyal follower of rules, not one for covert schemes. That left 2 others more ambitious, more reckless. Their history showed patterns matching this type of sabotage. Shin Hayul clenched his fist. Rage simmered, but strategy had to come before emotion. Timing was key. Capturing Smith wouldn't help. The man was likely just a pawn disposable if secrets risked exposure. Shin Hayul steadied his breath, gathering his thoughts. He had decided to confront the situation head-on. The tower loomed above him, glowing faintly. It held the answers buried behind layers of control. Inside, polished floors echoed under his steps. The silence pressed down as tension quietly built within. A man stood facing the skyline. Without turning, he acknowledged Shin Hayul's presence with calm familiarity. He finally turned to speak. Shin Hayul stood still, ready to reveal what he had discovered alone. Kim Kangyan's eyes narrowed. His posture shifted slightly, revealing a sharp awareness of Shin Hayul's intent. Shin Hayul observed the man closely. Kangyan's mood had shifted, colder now, as if concealing calculated control. Without hesitation, Shin Hayul readied himself mentally. He knew this moment would not come again so easily. The student stood firm as the instructor approached, tension rising under the blazing midday sun's sharp glare. Despite the warning, he activated the hidden device, its glow pulsing wildly, triggering a shift in the air. Suspicion grew as the instructor circled him. He knew escape was impossible now, but discovery meant failure. A strange shard surfaced from his case, humming with dormant power. The instructor's eyes widened in recognition. Staring at the glimmering elemental manite, he knew this was fate, an unrepeatable moment to change everything. The professor stood with urgency, cutting formalities short. His tone carried pressure and impatience without hesitation. Outside, he measured the student's presence, suspicious that someone young could provoke such high-level concern and secrecy. He demanded justification for this meeting. Anything less than extraordinary would be dismissed without further audience. Remaining composed, the student read the room carefully. He needed cooperation, not conflict, to proceed carefully. He leaned forward, revealing the real reason: an unstable crystal behind the Tower Master's disappearance, elemental manalite. The professor jerked upright in shock. The term elemental manalite wasn't meant to exist outside whispers. Eyes narrowed, he demanded answers. That crystal's identity was classified, unknown to anyone beyond inner council members. The student remained unfazed, fingers raised in calm defiance. His confidence provoked tension that filled the room. He leaned back slightly, clarifying he wasn't a spy nor a thief. His source was something deeper. With measured grace, he reached into his coat and revealed it, his own shard of elemental manalite. The professor jumped from his seat, startled by the radiant force suddenly pulsing from the student's hand. Eyes wide, he recognized the impossible. His instincts screamed as truth collided with what he once believed forbidden. The student held the crystal calmly. Its glow confirmed authenticity, the rarest form of pure elemental manalite. Suspicion lingered. The professor studied him, demanding to know if he truly shaped the manalite with intention. Without hesitation, the student affirmed his role. He created it, mastered it, and now revealed his capability. The Red Tower's top engineer, once unmatched in crafting, was now forced to reevaluate everything silently. Despite the Blue Tower's proud artisans, none had ever shaped elemental manalite with such natural precision before. Even the professor, ranking among the top 3 crafters, felt completely surpassed by the young student's talent. He questioned whether this outcome was fate or luck, unsettled by how easily his legacy felt shaken. The student confirmed both he earned it and chose the blue tower because it could contain the power. The professor leaned in, curiosity replacing skepticism. He asked how the student had created the impossible. Expression steady, Shin Hyul refused to explain. He dismissed it as coincidence and rare luck, avoiding deeper truths. With the crystal glowing faintly, he deflected further inquiry. His words danced around truth without revealing technique. The professor chuckled, acknowledging the dodge. Despite doubts, he accepted that some knowledge remains deliberately hidden. Respectfully, he yielded. Mages, after all, deserve secrets. The discussion ended with quiet agreement and subtle admiration. The professor analyzed the shard closely, identifying it as the only known stone holding 4 elemental properties. He recognized its rarity and asked about the student's intention behind revealing such a powerful material now. Shin Hyul responded firmly, explaining that he planned to craft an artifact using the manalite as its core. The professor reacted with disbelief. Few dared attempt such a feat with a source of raw instability. He considered the artifact's potential form defensive gear, channeling focus, or maybe a legendary weapon of overwhelming strength. Shin Hyul considered the options calmly. For basic enhancement, any medium-grade artifact would serve the function efficiently. Yet he paused. Using manalite meant standards were different. Ordinary materials could weaken its true potential entirely. He explained that quality materials were essential. The costs would rise, but he was fully prepared. The professor laughed, assuming Shin Hyul magical lineage meant the family would cover the expense without hesitation. But Shin Hyul rejected the assumption. He requested secrecy. This artifact must remain hidden, even from his own bloodline. The elder chuckled, amused by Shin Hyul's discretion. Still, the matter of payment couldn't be ignored forever. A magical calculation spell hovered mid-air, its symbols rotating rapidly. The total cost shocked even the professor. He questioned Shin Hyul's plan. Handling this alone, without family funding, seemed irrational and nearly impossible by tradition. Shin Hyul declined help. Instead, he boldly declared he would craft the elemental manalite here without delay. The professor's pulse quickened. Realization struck. Shin Hyul was prepared to demonstrate advanced magical crafting on the spot. Laughter echoed between them. Despite high stakes, both parties welcomed the bold deal with surprising ease. The professor agreed enthusiastically. Shin Hyul's proposal exceeded expectations, even allowing for additional support beyond the original request. Shin Hyul seized the moment. With momentum in his favor, he asked for one more specific favor. The professor hesitated. If unrelated to the artifact, it risked derailing the entire focus of their meeting. Shin Hyul revealed a separate item, an anonymous briefing disc labeled Level 6. The professor froze, stunned by its presence. Shin Hyul clenched his fist. The information disc was evidence tied directly to a dangerous hidden conspiracy. He revealed the truth. A Black Tower mage from the Academy had secretly passed him the file. Shin Hyul warned that Black Tower agents were currently infiltrating Obelisk Academy, operating in secrecy and gathering influence. With urgency in his voice, he asked for direct assistance in eliminating the infiltrators without hesitation. Later that night, under the moon's gaze, Shin Hyul departed silently, his request now hanging in the air. Shin Hyul offered a final warning. The mission ahead was uncertain, and vigilance was now essential. She nodded without hesitation. Confidence in her eyes, she promised they would meet again when ready. As her car disappeared down the quiet road, Shin Hyul stood alone beneath the fading city lights. Later, silence filled the dormitory hallway. He entered without a word, footsteps steady but heavy. He dropped onto the bed, fully clothed, exhaustion finally catching up after a day of revelations. Shin Hyul stared at the manalite. Fortune had aligned perfectly enough to keep everything hidden for now. Kim Kangan's separate research provided cover. Shin Hyul could pursue crafting the artifact without drawing family suspicion. Relieved, Shin Hyul avoided negotiating rights with Baeko. The delay granted time to stabilize his position discreetly. If nothing interfered, his control over the artifact's fate would remain secure for just a while longer. Meanwhile, the professor reflected in doubt. Whispers of strange activity at Obelisk Academy resurfaced in his thoughts. The tower stood silent, its spires ominous. Beneath it, hidden agents from the Black Tower remained active. Shin Hyul presented the chip. Aware its illegal origin made it fragile evidence, despite its undeniable importance. The professor doubted the claim. Normally, such suspicions from students lacked weight and wouldn't trigger formal action. Still, he gave permission. Despite the risks, he decided to trust Shin Hyul's instincts and proceed carefully. He exited the meeting room calmly, confident in the operation's success, phone pressed against his ear. Down the quiet hallway his steps echoed. He moved alone, calculating every possible variable with precision. The caller confirmed the data transfer. He gripped his phone tightly, knowing the consequences of failure. In the elevator, the city lights reflected on his suit. He whispered final instructions, almost done. The doors opened silently. He stepped out into the grand hall, operation already shifting into motion. He declared his choice calmly. The weight of responsibility settled, yet his expression remained sharp and steady. The room fell silent. Every guest at the table processed the decision, tension softening into quiet approval. Outside, winter skies mirrored his clarity. A chapter had closed, now the path forward was finally clear. She applauded him warmly. Her gesture broke the silence, welcoming his return as both heir and man. Surrounded by familiar faces, he stood taller. No longer unsure, he was ready to lead them all. His older brother greeted him loudly, laughter echoing. The mood shifted, warmth returning to the formal gathering. He placed a hand on Shin Hyul's shoulder, tone mixed part welcome, part warning wrapped beneath practiced smiles. Shin Hyul nodded respectfully. Despite past tension, he answered sincerely, grateful for the gesture, even if partly forced. Whispers stirred from across the room. Curiosity bloomed among younger onlookers, their thoughts innocent but sharp. He turned to the table, pausing briefly. Familiar faces stared back some kind, others unreadable, all watching closely. Jihan's comment came with a smile, but Shin Hyul sensed the subtle edge beneath the playful words. Seiya acknowledged him coolly, eyes sharp. She assessed him with practiced poise, offering no warmth yet. Shin Hyul remained composed, but his mind scanned deeper. Surface greetings couldn't conceal the atmosphere's underlying tension. He nodded slowly, sensing the trap. The invitation masked intent, yet he had prepared for everything. Jihan spoke casually, but his gaze lingered. Shin Hyul's vague reply offered nothing and yet said everything. Shin Hyul addressed the table calmly. He spoke of distance, of family drift, and why reunion mattered now. Her tone sharpened instantly. To her, his words sounded hollow, an excuse masking something far more calculated. He stood his ground, voice level. Truth or not, he welcomed their skepticism with quiet confidence. Chairs scraped harshly. One relative snapped, disgusted by what they saw as arrogance behind his measured words. Another rose, unwilling to be patient. Her voice cut through tension, demanding clarity, daring him to reveal everything. She demanded clarity, accusing him of scheming. Her voice trembled between challenge, suspicion, and restrained frustration. Shin Hyul posed a quiet question. If his denial held truth, would anyone present even believe him now? The table fell still. From above, distrust blanketed the room, thick and shared by nearly everyone. She scoffed, dismissing civility. For her, vague words equaled danger. She demanded facts, not vague posturing. Jihan broke the tension. He spoke with a smile, but his words pressed with political weight. Shin Hyul froze. The sharp mention of vision magic revealed more than he'd expected. Pressure rose around him instantly. They misunderstood his intent. To them, vision magic meant surrender, abandoning ambition, abandoning the right to lead. Tension exploded. Voices clashed again. Seiya's rejection echoed harshly, denying that this magic could be anything sincere. Breathing steady, Shin Hyul raised his hand. Silence fell as shimmering magic began to unfold in the air. He spoke clearly. Vision magic wasn't a game, it was his only path forward. As a powerless heir, Seiya yielded reluctantly. Her pride cracked under pressure, but she masked it with a reluctant concession. Others followed her lead. Despite confusion, they accepted his words, uncertain but not openly hostile anymore. Shin Hyul bowed his head slightly, offering gratitude. He knew gaining acceptance didn't mean earning their trust yet. Laughter broke the tension. Inyuk raised his glass, eager to pivot away from conflict toward comfort. The mood softened. Curiosity replaced suspicion. They wanted stories, not standoff. Shin Hyul hesitated, thoughts guarded behind his silence. The table had shifted to dessert. Conversations lightened, and the earlier weight had mostly drifted away. Laughter returned. Even the stiffest relatives leaned back now, momentarily forgetting why they'd braced themselves earlier. Old jokes surfaced. Memories spilled into the room, blurring present suspicion with fragments of easier, younger times. The clock struck. Its chimes sliced through warmth, subtle but sharp enough to pull him back inward. Shin Hyul's smile faded. Time pressed forward. The reprieve had passed, now came what he truly prepared for. A sharp ringtone pierced the calm. A news alert appeared, glowing crimson on a polished screen. Phones vibrated across the table. Every sibling reached instinctively, expressions shifting from casual to cautious alarm. Confusion spread fast. Eyes scanned headlines, breath caught mid-sentence. The gathering's warmth cracked without warning. She looked up, eyes wide. The urgency in the message sent a chill down her spine. Seiya's tone turned cold. Whatever arrived, this wasn't routine. Something critical was happening, and it wouldn't wait. Jihan narrowed his eyes. The alert's tone had changed. The silence around him was no coincidence. Shin Hyul glanced down at his own device. His expression hardened, Realizing this wasn't just internal politics, the urgent message loaded fully. Its content was clear: someone dangerous had resurfaced connected to their bloodline. He lowered the phone slowly, gaze now guarded. Questions would follow, but not before suspicion settled. His eyes sharpened. One phrase echoed in his mind: found him. And he knew they meant him. Shin Hyul's chest tightened. The message confirmed it. His instincts were right. Danger had crept too close again. He left the hall quickly, gripping his device tightly. One name kept repeating in his thoughts. Outside, under the night sky, the truth settled. Hanul's warning hadn't been paranoia. It was accurate. He scanned the full report. Evidence lined up clearly. Someone in the family was the trigger. Shin Hyul clenched his hand. Doubt wasn't an option. He'd act soon, but not without knowing the full truth. Shin Hyul pieced the logic together. The clues weren't random data patterns aligned under one calculated conclusion. A shadowed figure appeared in his mental projection. Malice and stealth marked the target's recent movements. The academy's layout and lecture schedules narrowed the suspect's opportunity to act down to one location. Friday exam day stood out. The distraction of combat made it perfect cover for illicit manipulation. If he planned sabotage, he'd strike the materials. Tampering before distribution was the only realistic window. The door burst open. She arrived just in time, timing perfect to trigger everything Shin Hyul anticipated. Thursday night, the final gap before test day. It was the moment everything aligned behind the scenes. His preparations paid off. Surveillance was active. Traps were laid. Now all that remained was proof. As his family talked upstairs, he coordinated silently. The Blue Tower intercepted movement from the supply room. Instructor Smith was exposed. But deeper, Shin Hyul's focus turned toward Jihan, whose silence now felt like concealment. Shin Hyul exhaled deeply. The operation had worked, every move calculated, every step hidden in plain sight. He walked alone, unhurried. The truth was exposed, yet none suspected how tightly he'd steered events. Recognition wasn't necessary. Still, the Blue Tower acknowledged him. Their praise confirmed the silent success he achieved. Shin Hyul grinned subtly. Rewards were welcome, but his true focus remained on keeping Hanul's predictions fulfilled. The phone rang. He answered calmly, ready to deliver the final update and begin the next move. Shin Hyul ended the call with calm confidence. The mission was done. He expected silence, not chaos. But everything changed in an instant. A deafening blast tore through the night without warning. Flames erupted behind him. Screams followed. Someone had attacked. The timing was no coincidence. He hit the ground hard, stunned. Dust and heat filled the air. Panic gripped his chest. Through the smoke, a shadow emerged. A voice repeated his name, mocking, angry, and drawing closer fast. The attacker emerged through smoke, magic pulsing violently. His eyes locked on Shin Hyul, intent on destruction. Shin Hyul stood frozen. The enemy's killing intent surged forward, loud, direct, and filled with merciless hatred.
Smoke and flames coiled in the distance as Hyul's shadowed enemy prepared for a brutal final strike. With hatred in his voice, the enemy cursed Hyul and lunged forward, summoning fire to his hand. Hyul's name echoed through the void as he sensed something awaken within his sealed magical core. An explosive surge burst beneath his feet. The enemy's scream trailed behind as power returned to Hyul. Blazing blue aura sparked around Hyul's body faster than light, his crimson eyes locked on the falling target. Hyul raised his arm, summoning a spiraling torrent. His water shield roared up against the incoming blast. Straining with grit, Hyul clenched his jaw, but pressure surged as cracks formed along the watery barrier. Inside the collapsing vortex, Hyul realized the torrent's strength far surpassed his current control over defensive magic. Focusing every ounce of will, Hyul twisted his fingers, reinforcing the shield before the core ruptured outward. The impact landed beyond the barrier. Flames erupted across the city skyline, shaking buildings and scattering broken glass. Thrown back by the shockwave, Hyul crashed onto the concrete, his limbs aching and breath uneven. Blood dripped from his scorched arm. The shield had held, but not without a painful cost. His opponent laughed coldly from across the plaza, stepping forward with arrogant confidence and controlled footsteps. Eyes gleaming red, the enemy mocked Hyul's survival, declaring their massive difference in magic and skill. Despite injuries, Hyul stood again. Fists clenched. Baek Sahyuk's name burned like fire in his spinning mind. Baek Sahyuk suddenly staggered, his laughter turning wild. Hyul's posture had shifted into something unnaturally calm. A crimson haze flooded Hyul's gaze, his pupils narrowed, and energy spiraled uncontrollably around his clenched form. Sahyuk's eyes widened as he recognized the vial of forbidden alchemical drug shattered and spilled onto Hyul's blood. Flames ignited along Hyul's skin as berserker magic consumed reason, flooding his nerves with violent arcane adrenaline. Face twitching, Sahyuk screamed at Hyul's recklessness, but Hyul only grinned, now entirely driven by pure survival instinct. Panting hard, Hyul focused his internal flow and activated third circle magic. Burning injections surged through his veins. Without hesitation, he lunged forward and grabbed Sayuk, slamming him down with a reinforced burst of strength. Blood smeared his jaw, but Hyul laughed through clenched teeth, muscles refusing to yield despite the damage. Sayuk hissed in disbelief. Eyes twitching, Hyul's pain threshold had vanished under the berserker's volatile, twisted magical force. With a wild grin, Sayuk's pupil narrowed. He welcomed the madness, fully committed to a fatal conclusion. With a shout, Hyul unleashed burning injection directly into Sayuk's chest, flame bursting between their locked bodies. A thick pillar of smoke spiraled skyward, muffling the chaos that echoed across the burning schoolyard. The stars shimmered above as the magic storm subsided, leaving silence where fire once violently roared. From the smoke, Sayuk appeared again, stepping over Hyul's crumpled body with disbelief in his eyes. He stared down, panting. Hyul still breathed. Twice now, the boy had survived his lethal finishing strikes. Hyul exhaled slowly, blood on his lips, his eyes meeting Sayuk's hateful glare without fear. Sayuk froze, trembling. Rage swelled inside him as Hyul's quiet defiance cut deeper than magic ever could. Screaming violently, Sayuk clawed his face, losing control as madness and fury collided inside his berserker brain. Then, as if flipping a switch, Sayuk shrugged casually, cold laughter replacing the tantrum like nothing happened. Hyul smirked faintly, recognizing the signs. Those unhinged mood shifts were proof the berserker drug still lingered. Magic surged again as Hyul raised his arm, sensing the overwhelming force radiating from Sayuk's core. He narrowed his eyes, confused. The berserker drug shouldn't grant this much raw magical amplification or stability. Doubt gnawed at him. Something felt unnatural. Hyul debated, checking deeper, questioning the true source of Sayuk's power. Drawing breath, he lifted his hand and summoned a slicing wind spell. Light curved sharply around his wrist. Blades of air howled through the night sky toward Sayuk, who stood calmly, gaze locked and unshaken. Sayuk exploded in rage, flames circling his fist as he prepared to obliterate Hyul's incoming spell. Hyul readied himself, realizing Wind Sphere lacked the cutting force to overwhelm Sayuk's shielded, fiery counterattack. The city lights shimmered below as Sayuk hurled his fireball, bright, wild, and carelessly powered by wrath. Hyul gritted his teeth. He hadn't expected escalation this fast, but knew retreat wasn't an option anymore. Channeling concentrated wind into a sphere, Hyul cast his next move with urgency. Arrow boom ignited midair. Hyul's eyes widened as shockwaves approached. His arrow boom struck, but retaliation was already heading toward him. The spell had landed. Hyul's heart raced with hope, believing he'd finally overwhelm Sayuk's defenses. But Sayuk emerged through flames, manic grin stretching wide, channeling pure fire mana into a burning core. At point-blank range, the flame shotgun spell ignited, aiming to vaporize Hyul without room to dodge. Hyul's pupils contracted as Sayuk screamed in fury, unleashing his ultimate spell with reckless final desperation. Flames streaked toward Hyul, but he stood firm, calculating the spell's limited reach with startling precision. Sayuk watched closely, eyes twitching. Something felt off. Hyul wasn't dodging, even as fire spiraled in. Then realization struck. No way Hyul would simply miscalculate. There had to be a reason for this. The spell missed completely. Hyul stepped through smoke, mocking calmly, revealing he'd never activated his movement chip. Sayuk cracked with laughter, veins glowing green, dismissing Hyul's words as madness, his corrupted mana flaring with volatile instability. Hyul stared straight ahead, voice steady. Sayuk had forgotten everything, even the chip he once relied on. Irritated, Sayuk's purple-tinted mana flickered from his eye, a sign of unstable pressure nearing combustion again. Enraged, he launched another reckless strike, shouting insults, his movement traced by sharp lines of green light. Hyul easily sidestepped the incoming attack, explaining the chip's true role, enhancing spell range and body synergy. Sayuk snarled back, veins pulsing, refusing the truth. His ego cracked louder than the mana tearing through him. Hyul adjusted his stance, green light wrapping around him as internal circuits aligned with magical rhythm. He analyzed mana flow mid-battle, reshaping inner structures, experimenting with magic circles, acceleration paths, and body response. Even from corrupted sources like illegal chips and berserker serum, he extracted insight for rapid development. Lifting his hand, Hyul released blue energy upward, intent sharpened, technique stabilized, and resonance finally reached completion. Hyul extended his arm, unstable mana surging, reacting wildly to the mysterious glyphs etched midair. As ancient forces stirred, the arcane resonance triggered a binding sequence buried deep within his bloodline. The spellbook awakened, emitting celestial lights. Within its pages, truths of lost eras began to unfold. Memories not his flickered fragments of a life forgotten, skills unclaimed, and promises bound by ancient oaths. Time stilled. With power restored, Huel now faced the beginning of a fate written long before birth. Huel hesitated, knowing his next move would lock the mana. Every mistake could prove fatal now. Above the battlefield, he analyzed positions and terrain, weighing risks as his enemies swarmed with intent. Calculations complete, he stabilized his core. The 3-minute resonance was brief, but more than enough. Energy surged through his limbs. With precise footing and breath control, Huel triggered the ground-binding seal. Columns burst upward, crushing enemies mid-charge. One survivor staggered, caught in shock as his men were felled. The enemy trembled in disbelief, recognizing the third circle magic, something Huel was never supposed to use. Calm and composed, Huel analyzed the outburst, already anticipating the reckless strike about to come. Flames raged toward him, wild and furious, but his stance remained unmoved, waiting for the moment. Noticing the flawed casting, Huel smirked. His opponent relied on brute force, lacking control and deeper understanding. With swift motion, Huel summoned a water shield, neutralizing the fire spell as steam erupted skyward. Driven by rage, the enemy launched another fire spell, convinced this time Huel couldn't block it. Huel calmly shaped a vortex shield, tightening its spiral with flawless control over surrounding mana particles. Confused, the attacker realized too late that his fire spell had vanished before even reaching Huel. Huel's aura surged brighter, effortlessly deflecting ambient energy, leaving no room for foreign spells to breach. As his enemy staggered, burned and trembling, Huel stepped forward, untouchable beneath his perfected defensive layer. The man laughed manically, mistaking fear for clarity, as his trembling hand barely held energy. Backpedaling frantically, he shouted claims of sudden understanding, desperation clinging to his every motion. Delusional, he blamed Huel's power on forbidden doping, refusing to believe strength could come through will. Huel stood silently, unshaken. His calm presence contrasted the chaos, signaling the end without a word. Stepping forward into a swirling pool of energy, Huel let judgment fall, cold and absolute. Huel cast Darkness Bind, enveloping the enemy in shadows that pulled him into an abyssal void. Panic spread across the man's face as the ground vanished, his feet trapped by binding tendrils. Huel watched with cold eyes, knowing hesitation would have cost him everything in this deadly confrontation. Inside the void, the man screamed, lost in darkness, his senses severed from the physical realm. Still defiant, he shouted into the emptiness, demanding Huel face him, but no one answered his cries. Huel unleashed Earthbind and Airbind together, layers of magical force wrapping tightly around his foe. Chains constricted every joint, suspending the man midair, his movements nullified by the complex binding pattern. He gasped in shock, recognizing the advanced technique binding spells fused from multiple elemental disciplines simultaneously. Huel stepped forward, voice calm. He declared the final mercy, a quick and painless end. Raging, the man screamed defiance, blaming fate. Huel remained unmoved, knowing his words came far too late. Huel appeared beside him in the void, calmly accusing him of always blaming others for failure. He explained why illegal boosters were avoided not because of rarity, but the brutal side effects. Chains tightened as Huel subtly adjusted mana flow, triggering pain points the drug-enhanced body couldn't handle. The enemy screamed as Huel demonstrated precise control, tuning frequency to exploit the artificial enhancements. Overwhelmed by pain, the man's defiance collapsed into sobbing pleas, his breath ragged, hope nearly extinguished. Huel explained the AI and body had already surpassed their thresholds. Internal collapse was now inevitable. The enemy convulsed violently under strain, body tearing apart as Huel stood still and observant. In a soft tone, Huel thanked him not for what he was, but what he triggered. Laughing coldly, Huel mocked the idea of redemption, declaring the situation far beyond repair or reason. As Huel delivered the final strike, energy surged, ending the threat that once called him weak. The corrupted mana core ruptured violently, unraveling the enhanced body in a final unstable collapse. Ash and fractured energy dispersed quietly across the pavement. Huel stood still, watching the aftermath settle. As silence returned, a faint buzzing noise drew his attention downward to a fallen device. He picked up the phone, paused, then accepted the call with a composed, measured breath. Huel reported the outcome calmly. His voice steady, he addressed his father as the call connected. Huel calmly spoke into the phone, revealing he knew he'd been watched the entire time. The forest eyes glowed red, an unseen observer, hidden, yet clearly present during the entire confrontation. Despite the chaos, no authorities or students had appeared, something far too strange to ignore. Huel reasoned aloud, noting only one person would let the situation unfold without stepping in. He met her in secret, bound by family restrictions. She watched, but could never interfere. In a high-rise office, a figure acknowledged Hyul's actions, claiming everything had gone according to plan. Hyul sensed something off as the line went silent, a disturbance creeping in through the shadows. Footsteps approached methodically. A masked agent emerged, clad in black, red eyes glowing beneath the hood. The voice confirmed the Wursek Hyun had been deployed. A new threat now hunted Hyul. Hyul spotted the hooded group from the shadows, their target already on the ground, barely conscious. He stayed hidden behind the bushes, watching them move, his fingers trembling but never reaching for help. Hyul stepped forward silently, knowing any action now would reveal what he'd truly become inside. He decided to prove his growth using forbidden knowledge to imitate the third circle magic without hesitation. Inside, he admitted the truth: the power wasn't his, but the bluff had already taken root. Hyul admitted to himself that borrowed strength alone wasn't enough to protect what truly mattered. Now, he feared exposure. If they knew the truth, the family's retaliation would crush him without hesitation. Using layered illusions and silencing spells, he cloaked the scene before anyone else could intervene or notice. His voice steady, he acknowledged the call, analyzing tone, waiting judgment, while reinforcements quietly approached his location. Call ended. Hyul exhaled, alone again. For now, survival was the only thing he could control. Seokhyun stayed silent. Lips curled. Hyul's bluff hadn't escaped his notice, but it intrigued him deeply. He burst into laughter, amused by Hyul's bold deception, impressed that someone dared pretend against their bloodline. Hyul's calm facade cracked slightly as an all-too-familiar voice echoed through the air, cold and deliberate. The cloaked figure stepped forward with glowing eyes. An old guardian once trusted, now possibly hunting him. Hyul straightened, heart steady. Enemies or allies, he couldn't tell yet, but he was ready to act. Seokhyun assessed the bruises with practiced eyes. Quietly impressed, Hyul was still standing upright. A pulse of green light stitched wounds together just enough to hold him until professional care arrived. Hyul nodded politely, concealing pain. Trust had limits, but this favor bought him a brief shield. The cleanup crew ensured silence, removing bodies and traces. Tonight's incident wouldn't reach the outside world. Underneath a cold starlit sky, the building stood tall, its secrets locked behind glass and shadows. Hyul stumbled inside, cursing under his breath. The pain returned quickly once adrenaline began wearing off. He froze, spotting damage and an intruder's signature. Nothing valuable was stolen, but something worse had arrived. A figure emerged from the shadows, eerily calm, as if this ambush were merely a meeting. Hyul stayed alert, assessing the stranger's intent, wondering if he'd just walked into a new trap. The man smirked beneath the hood, revealing knowledge, affiliations, and failures Hyul hadn't realized others were tracking. Blood dripping, Hyul lashed out, enraged. The intruder mocked him, but still hadn't struck directly. Hyul's frustration boiled his oath to stay strong, mocked by his trembling hands, and another humiliating encounter. The masked man chuckled carelessly, treating failure like routine, his tone too calm for someone so dangerous. With the deal collapsing, he spoke casually of payment, clients, and silencing leaks with efficient practice cruelty. A grin widened under the hood. Hyul wasn't meant to last through the night, and they knew. Hyul turned away coldly, distancing himself from guilt. Sentiment had no place in tonight's brutal reality. The masked man reported indifferently: chips, tech enhancements, berserker state, another manipulated life sacrificed for someone's objective. Hyul's expression tensed. Brain dead, that meant the boy was already gone, body moving without willpower. Far below, under moonlight, two strangers escorted the limp body, now a breathing shell, robbed of thought.